limitations, and where are we sort of not addressing the needs of communities and individuals when it comes to psychotherapy and mental health?
Thank you. So, psychotherapy was created for people with mental disorders. So, there's a stigma around receiving psychotherapy at this point. Right now, people seek psychotherapy when something either feels wrong or someone in their lives is pushing them to go to resolve some kind of issue that's probably been going on for a really long time. I think it's so much more than that. I think it's a tool that anybody can use at any point to improve their lives alongside many other tools. Community, sunlight, diet, those are things that can almost be just as effective in improving someone's life. So I think we need to change the conversation around what wellness is and what it isn't, and basically teach people very young, maybe as young as middle school and high school, about wellness, about community, about emotions. Part of the problem is also that people think it's not okay to not be okay. People struggle with being sad for a couple days. What does that mean about me? And I think life is a lot of things, and we need to be able to hold space for all of our emotions at all times. And that's why I love like Buddhist influences on psychotherapy. DBT is something that's really popular right now because it's teaching people
Can you tell people what that is? Explain to them.
Dialectical behavioral therapy is a psychotherapy that is used to treat some clients with the highest needs, and it teaches mindfulness and meditation alongside skill building, and it also incorporates psychotherapy, and we see really positive results when we do that. So I think psychotherapy is limited right now because a lot of the talk therapies, there's not an emphasis on community and there's not an emphasis on skill building. DBT emphasizes both in combination with talk therapy. So I think we've come really far in the last 50 years, but we have so much farther to go.
Thank you. I'm curious, we're talking a little bit about stigma, and I'm curious to hear from Andrea to share a little bit about your personal story and what kind of stigmas you were up against, if you'd share a little bit about that.
Good evening, everyone. I was born in Venezuela, and in my culture, there is the big stigma that if you seek psychotherapy or any sort of help when you are struggling, you're weak or you're crazy or you don't have the ability to face the obstacles that life gives you. I moved to Italy. I grew up in a very abusive family. So in my home, there were a lot of things that weren't functional, that needed help and needed unraveling. I ended up doing that and seeking the help of a psychiatrist when I was in college. So I recognized that wasn't a weakness, but being vulnerable and wanting to attack a part of my emotional health that wasn't really clicking with everything else along my life wasn't a weakness, but was something that I needed to do. I'm a very competitive person. I started playing professional when I was 16 years old. And finding something that wasn't really clicking for me was bothersome. I don't know if any of you in the room can relate. It was out of place. So I wanted to find someone who could relate to my experience. And that was very difficult to do. So I was carrying this stigma of my culture who was, telling me not to seek help. Bottom line, when I was by myself, I knew there was something wrong and I couldn't really pinpoint what it was. And the combination of factors that I have a lot of layers to my culture. I was born in a country, I was raised in another. My ethnicities are mixed. I cannot identify with one ethnicity, one culture. So there were a lot of emotional layers, cultural layers, traditional layers. That was very difficult for me to find a therapist who could relate. Someone who could really understand in how to tap into the emotion and how to access all the things that I had put in my resentment basket or in my side file cabinet. So that was something I had to really fight through. Definitely wasn't a conversation in school, wasn't a conversation that was normalized for me as a young teenager or even in elementary school. I wish that could have been proved earlier as a useful tool and resource as a child or as an adolescent, I would have probably not encountered obstacles that made me believe that life wasn't worth living. So,
Yeah, thank you. And if you're open to sharing, and you mentioned if you are open to sharing this, you had several bouts with suicide. Is that correct?
Yeah, I tried to commit suicide when I was 17.
Yeah, and so when did you end up seeking healing, or in a really transformative way?
So it wasn't until I was 23 years old, in my last semester at the University of Texas, where I tapped into the resources of Healthy Horns, and I was able to complete 6 sessions with a therapist. And it was my first time ever seeking true help in a way where it wasn't it wasn't what's wrong with me, it wasn't I'm scared I'm gonna die. It was more like, I want to figure this out. I don't know how I'm reacting to different things. I don't know where this is coming from. I know I've had a lot of trauma, but I don't want to guess. I want to rely on a professional that is going to break it down for me and tell me, as a very logical person, hey, this is very common in someone who has gone through what you've gone through. So it helped me feel less alone. And I knew at the end of the 6 sessions that he really saw me and understood me to a different level, which proved a very, very difficult to continue the journey in seeking a therapist that would really connect culturally and with experience. And that is one of the challenges that I think our community goes through, finding the right fit, because you build a relationship with someone who you need to trust in order for you to tap into the real obstacles of why you're behaving a certain way.
Thank you. Gianni, I just want to go back to you for a second, because when we spoke in our pre-call, you had talked about 2 things: representation in graduate school, and just how that, not necessarily the representation, but afterwards, the amount of therapists that are representing people that are from marginalized communities or, BIPOC, not really representing them, in that way. And then also you mentioned your own personal journey, this idea of what your grandmother, I think you told me your grandmother, or someone said, what is culturally kind of common from your perspective. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little more about that.
Well, I hate to put my grandmother on the spot here, but I would say all of my grandparents didn't believe in mental health disorders or therapy. They thought if you were depressed, you needed to get a second or third job, stay busy. They would laugh about that. The conversation for me growing up was very much like, life is hard, push through it, period. And as I became an adult and I started experimenting with psychotherapy, coaching, plant medicines, the conversation every day that I'd have with myself is like, today might be hard, but wow, look how great it is outside. And, maybe I'll make a friend. So just having access to those tools gave me access to so much joy. And I'm still able to work hard and do different things with my life, but also make space for lots of joy. So I had the weird experience of seeking psychotherapy after graduating from UT. I had a great experience with Healthy Horns as well. 6 sessions, though, didn't quite do the trick for me, but it definitely made a huge difference in those 6 sessions, and I wanted to continue with therapy after that point. I was just clicking through psychology today, and I did not see people who looked like me, and all the bios kind of seemed similar, and it was just really hard to identify someone who could really understand the kind of traumas I'd been through, the kind of family I come from. So it was a very disheartening experience. And then I went to UT to study social work, and majority of my classmates were white. And so when I got there, a lot of things about the way I expressed myself were just different. And everyone was very welcoming and accepting, but a lot of the conversations in the School of Social Work are about people of color, but majority of the people there aren't. So there were so many times that I would hear people with great intentions expressing themselves, and I felt like I had to represent my people a little bit, and sometimes that's a little exhausting. So as a social worker, I very much enjoy working with other people in the Hispanic community. It means the world to me to be able to help someone who once felt the way I felt growing up or the way I felt in college. It makes my life more meaningful and more beautiful. So yeah, I hope that more people of color do decide to be therapists, but unfortunately, going to school to be a therapist is a very expensive process, and you're expected to take unpaid internships while you're in college, but it's a full-time internship. You're expected to seek supervision afterwards, where you could be making $20 an hour, and a lot of these students have student debt at that point. So if you don't come from a family that's able to support you through that process, you will not be able to stay in Austin. A lot of people decide to switch to tech or HR and other professions, unfortunately. I've met so many amazing people who would have been great social workers or psychiatrists or psychologists, but because the cost of education was too expensive, they decided to go a different route because they didn't have someone in their family pushing them who was also already in that field. You know, that makes a huge difference, having a mentor. And unfortunately, in the Hispanic community, we don't have mentors in mental health. I was the first person in my family to go to therapy, the first person to become a therapist. So there was nobody encouraging me to be a therapist. They, from the start, were like, please study business.
Thank you, Gianni. Olivia, I'd like to turn to you and just hear a little bit about your personal story about how you got into this work. You grew up in a really challenging environment, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but can you talk a little bit about the barriers to entry to your own kind of health journey, and what sort of prevented that from happening, or the blocks, or whatever you want to share about that?
Thank you. I just want to present first to the people who do choose to follow their dreams or their passion and really care about being of service to others, even though the cost is really high and the barrier to entry is also high. With bottles of water costing $10 a pop these days, it's getting harder. So without getting into too much detail, I was born and raised in an international cult, a pretty infamous, notorious one. I've lived with thousands of people over the course of my life, moved around every 6 months to 2 years. So it's like, it sucks if you have 2 bad parents, but when you have 20 to 50, the trauma compounds. So about 6 years ago, I really got desperate about my own healing journey. But the problem was I couldn't remember so much of my life. I had huge blanks in my memory. And so traditional therapy wasn't very impactful because I couldn't remember the things that had caused trauma in my life. And so it wasn't until I experienced psychedelic therapy, particularly MDMA therapy, that I began to remember a lot of the events that had happened in my life. It has been challenging to find people that relate to my story because it's pretty unusual as well. But that does speak to the power of psychedelics, again, because it works within us as its own incredible, powerful healer, that even just having somebody sit with you and witness the story of your life and everything that has impacted you unlocks such a deep level of healing. And that's what happened with me. The person that was sitting with me was trained in psychedelic assisted therapy, but could not have been more different from me. Just having the presence of somebody with that much empathy was a really incredible start to me changing my life and understanding all of the things that had created so much dysfunction in my life relationally. I got to see the power of community, and I also got to see the dark side of community and what can happen when egos run amok and the corruption of power. And then I also got to see what happens when families that care about the same thing help each other and support each other. So I got a pretty wide variety of different experiences growing up in my life, depending on what city I was living in or what commune I was living in at the time. So I'm at this point in my life just extremely thankful for everything that I've been through, for all of the experiences that I've had in my life, because it helps me to understand so many different experiences. And I'm thankful for the entire human experience and all the emotions that we get to go through, because that's sort of the gift of being a human, is that we get to experience the pain and the joy alongside with it.
Oh, thank you. I'm curious if I can just ask a follow-up question about that journey. You had that compassionate witness, that compassionate inquiry of someone who is able to hold space for you and, allow you to be seen and heard. And I'm just curious what, we reference sometimes when we talk about psychedelics, the inner healer. There may be some debate tonight if that exists or not. But for you, I'm curious what your inner healer was like and how you found, if you found sovereignty and agency in your own healing versus, sometimes in relationship to therapist, it's like, you need to do this. And the best kind of therapy is when we allow the person to heal themselves. And I'm just curious what your experience was like.
So I think the most profound part of my healing journey was being able to let go of shame. So a big part of my story was that I had experienced a lot of things that I thought I would take to the grave with me and never tell anybody, because that would ultimately mean I was unworthy of love. And having the courage to be able to speak to those things and actually admit them for the first time in my life and not have that person run away was a really big catalyst in my healing, so much so that it became something that I owned and that empowered me, as opposed to something that corroded me from within. So I think just having that validation that I was not broken and that there was not something wrong with me was really, really helpful. I believe in the technology of language, and I think that we can change every pattern in our life by changing the way that we communicate both with others and the way that we communicate with ourselves. And so having somebody validate my experience and what I went through and acknowledge that and meet it with compassion enabled me to change the way I then spoke to myself. And I think that is what really started to change, and also enables me to do the same for others.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Gianni, I'm curious if there's anything you want to add about unlocking. We talked about the sort of unlocking within with plant medicines or other therapies, but how you see this working.
Well, as a therapist, I'm kind of a master unlocker at this point, and some people are much easier to unlock than others. Usually children, younger people are much easier to work with. They have more flexibility. So for people who have been treatment resistant to traditional forms of psychotherapy or maybe aren't responding to antidepressants, psychedelics could be maybe the first thing that really helps them open up and unlock all these parts of your brain that I like to call them dungeons. Like, we all have a dungeon, and inside there's a litter box of crap that we should work through, but we probably won't. And so a lot of people don't want to open that door, but a lot of plant medicines, they like kick through that door and like you process it. But the positive thing about that is that it doesn't feel as bad as it would if you were completely sober. There's a lot more serotonin and good feeling chemicals in the body that actually make it easier to process all those things that you may have been avoiding for probably your whole life at that point. So I think they could be very powerful in that sense, that you could get maybe 5 years of therapy done in 5 intense hours. And it's just really beautiful to watch people go through that process. But the most unexpected thing about psychedelics that I've observed as a mental health professional is that it's not a cure to a problem, that it's an experience that might be hard, that might be intense, And once you process that, what's left is the ability to use the medicine to create more meaning and purpose in your life. Creativity. How do I use what I've been through to make the world a better place? And that's something that I think there's no drug on the market that can do that at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to think about it as like these are tools, and maybe with a facilitator or guide, but like helping us hold the flashlight to look into this messy closet and just shining the light on it. And then, well, and we're going to talk about integration in a second, but the light is shined on it, and then you got to do the work. And it gives us, the idea that we have sovereignty and agency, and not that it's a magic pill, but that we get to have a choice in our healing. So I want to transition to this idea of psychedelic integration. And I'd love to hear from you, Olivia, about what is it and what does it require? Why it's this buzzword that really in the past 5 years, I think, has really intensified as an important component of the psychedelic journey process, along with preparation as well. But tell me a little bit about that and why it's so important.
Well, I think at its core, it's the merging of two ideas or two things, right? The old and the new. So it's literally a merging. And for that merging to take place, there has to be space that's created for that to happen. And so when we go in and we start processing all of the things that have happened in our life, that space starts to create, especially as it pertains to psychedelic therapy, right? The neuroplasticity starts to form, your mind becomes a sponge, and all of a sudden you have all of this space to take in new information, new insights start to come through. And it's about taking those insights and that understanding and merging them with yourself, with who you are. So in TAP integration, the software platform that I've created, we focus on 3 different components of integration. So you have the mind, which is the cognitive part of integration. It's understanding things from a different perspective, maybe taking on new frameworks that help you to move past blocks in your life, to understand that maybe the way that you remember things is not the most helpful. So shifting the way that you see things, taking in new resources is really important with all of that new space. Can you learn new things that can help you to continue to become the person that you want to be? So having a resource guide of books, podcasts, videos that can really help you to maximize on the neuroplasticity that forms after this therapy. And then you have body integration, and this pertains to your nervous system, really going all in on regulating the nervous system with grounding practices, with breath work, connecting back to the body, because some people, they live up here, especially with trauma, disassociation. They can just be stuck in their mind and so disconnected from their body. So how can we bring people back to a connection with their body, as well as releasing trauma that might be stored and stuck there? And then you have the heart integration, and this is where we connect to all of the emotions that need to be felt and processed and released, like the grief and the sorrow from understanding that maybe you didn't have the right support system that you deserved growing up, and you didn't have the love and the nurturing. And then it's also about deepening your connections with other people. The quality of our life can directly be connected to the quality of our relationships with other people. And because so much of our trauma was started and created by our relationships with others, there's a lot of deep work that can happen there, and that's where community comes in. You start to see how you impact others, how you relate to others, how they relate to you. And so with the integration of the heart, we start to understand how we can relate to others in an authentic way, how we can be ourselves, how we can express vulnerability in a safe setting, so we can start to repair some of the relationships that we have with other people.
Thank you for that. Andrea, I'm curious, I know you haven't necessarily had a psychedelic experience, but what has your integration process been in general with your healing?
To me, it's been a little more of a simple thought process. I like to think if this, then that, in a lot of the things that I do in life. And my process with integration and with beginning my own healing was just, I was sick of it. I was just fed up with the way I felt, with the conversations that I was having with myself, with how I was seeing me, and knowing that I was the only one that was seeing myself that way. So I grew up as an only child. So I've always been really in tune with my body and with the outdoors. I love when we talk about the simple things. I'm always barefoot. If you come to my house and grab coffee, I'm most likely outside and barefoot. In the deepest, darkest moments of my life, I've always sought refuge in nature. Whether it's a storm, whether it's a very quiet scenery. I love silence as much as I love music that makes me just shake from the inside. And I found that it's shown up always for me paying attention to where I am, whether that it's in nature preferably or in a room full of people that are here for a reason and they feel a certain way about themselves that I will never know unless they tell me. So that's been part of the integration, the combination between knowing where I am and trying to connect with the universe I live in and I'm part of, and the people that make part of that universe and their energy. Because I deeply believe if our energies intermingle and they become one, we can accomplish incredible things as human beings.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember you talking about when you moved from Venezuela to Italy, you were outside all the time, right? And then you moved to, you were...
I moved into a town that was inland, and I lived in what it was a former jail, like Roman times. Thick walls, there wasn't very much. I went from living on a beach to going inland and having everything. I like to think I was eradicated from my natural habitat, and I like to think of myself as a person that belongs to the tropics. But it was difficult to connect in a way that I didn't have any nature around me. So I tried to heal or try to unconsciously, I didn't know I was engaging in these behaviors that ended up being helpful for my healing. So I would just dance, like cathartically dance.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I kind of wanted, that's an excellent transition to the question for Gianni, but also just to share myself. Like, I went two-step dancing last week, and it was one of the best integrations that I've done of like learning to trust and be in my body and trust others and follow, right? Being a follow. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see where somatic therapies, how much that sort of pre-verbal, what messages are held in the body that we cannot access with words. And so I'm curious, for you, Gianni, like, where have you seen sort of somatic therapies step up or just be looked at as a real tool to accessing trauma?
It's a powerful tool because the body stores trauma, and also survivors of trauma have a lot of pent up adrenaline. So movement can be very powerful in releasing that trauma.
Yeah. I'm curious, Olivia, if you want to mention anything about somatic stuff.
Yeah, so anything that can get you connected back to the body. For me, breath work has completely changed my life, so that's the one I really like to do the most. But there's so many things that calm your nervous system. And again, this all goes back to your inner healer, your bio-individuality, what works for you. For some people, breath work gives them panic attacks, and so that just does not help. So they like Kundalini or dancing or nature. So what is it that's going to help you regulate your nervous system, connect to the somatic experience of being in your body, feeling safe in your body? Could be meditating, in the dark and just doing a body scan somewhere where you feel really safe. Feeling safe is a lot more challenging for some people than it is for others. And so how can we continue to curate and personalize the best tools for you? So that's part of self-discovery and figuring out what's best. But those are great. That's a great list of rituals and exercises.
Thank you. We talked a little bit about community before, and I'm curious, Gianni, from your perspective, how we can incorporate more community-based approaches in psychotherapy. And is that the way of the future, group therapy? Really, in indigenous communities, there wasn't, everything was community-based. And if some could say that we are in this conundrum because we lack a connection to others, and obviously ourselves as well, but I'm curious how you think these community-based approaches could serve us better.
When someone has community, especially a community that's been through a similar trauma, it's a lot easier for them to process that trauma and it not manifest as PTSD. And we see that because people who've experienced environmental trauma, like an earthquake or a hurricane, they go through that with their town and they're able to talk about it regularly and process it regularly, and usually doesn't develop into PTSD. So group therapy can be very powerful in processing a trauma, but I think therapy in general with where you live is so important. I have personally worked with people who are clinically depressed who did all the psychotherapy, which will always be individualistic. I think it will always be an individualist practice because that's how it started. So incorporating group therapy can be super helpful, but I don't think that's enough. I think people need to be connected to the people they live around. They need to have a relationship with their neighbors, people with different points of views. I think it's equally as important as psychotherapy because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen people not be able to cure their depression or chronic anger, or how can you heal around relationships if you're not able to form more relationships? And so I think it's very, very important. It needs to extend far beyond group therapy.
Yeah, I work with a lot of veterans and first responders through an organization called the Illuminating Co. And we have a 25-week program. We have week-long retreats and then 8 weeks of preparation and 16 weeks of integration. And so much of that transition and that transformation comes from that community, because especially some of these individuals, as they were in process of being in community, that community became toxic, or it became an environment where it was not safe to talk about not being well. And for some, I was just an example of some firefighters that have worked with a lot of toxic masculinity. So creating this community, that to me is the real medicine, the community as the medicine. So, and I'm curious, Olivia, if there's anything else you want to mention about community as an integration tool. You've said a little bit already, but what you found.
Yeah, I think the other piece that I would add is just really enhancing your external self-awareness, how well you understand the impact that you have on others, and continuing to improve that as a form of self-mastery, really continuing to relate to others in an authentic way and share your story, be able to hold space for other people sharing their story, and also to really confront the triggers that come up in community and with other people. One thing I tell my clients after we do a session together is your triggers might become a lot louder than they were before, but they can be your best friend because they are the best signal that we have to show us where we still have some wounding, relational wounding. And with me, like having grown up in such a big community, it took a long time for me to feel comfortable in certain community settings. But because I kept pushing through that, those triggers, they start to reduce themselves until you get to a place of neutrality. And then you're not triggered by that anymore. So instead of running from them, really leaning in. Why does this person trigger me so much? Why am I having all of this judgment? One that I hear a lot is, they're just not doing the work. No one here is doing the work, It's really easy to get on our pedestal once we start doing the work. So where are the judgments cutting us off from love and connecting to our heart and in relationship to other people? So that's a really easy indicator, is just following the judgment in your head and see where that's disconnecting you from the people around you.
Thank you. I kind of want to move into the third act of this conversation, which is the future. I mean, we're in the future right now. It's evolving. It's the Wild West. It's moving every day, and every day there's new news about policy and different therapies and politics and whatnot. But everything's changing, and that's actually really exciting too, because it means we can co-create together. So I'm curious, just from a few of you, what you're most excited about. Olivia, you're really excited about technology and AI, and I'd love to hear from you. I mean, you can mention other things too, but for many people that feels very scary and actually anti-psychedelic, but I'm curious where it can be a tool.
I think ultimately AI is going to be a reflection of humanity, and the more that we can train it in compassion and empathy, that it can be a really powerful tool. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's days that ChatGPT is more emotionally intelligent than I am. And I'm like, I don't trust myself to send this message. Let me see what ChatGPT would say. So I think it's like, it can be very useful in improving communication. Again, going back to what I said earlier, that if we can learn how to change our communication, we can change all the patterns in our life. And so working with it to enhance the way that we communicate to ourselves and to others can be very, very powerful. And then just with TAP integration, we're training AI guides to help people support and keep them accountable on their integration path. So I think it's something that we can really wield as a powerful way to integrate and help humanity to progress.
Gianni, what do you think about AI guides or AI therapists, or what are your thoughts?
I think I'm a lot better at helping people send awkward texts. In fact, I used to offer it as a service when I was a life coach, and people were willing to pay a lot of money for one text message to be edited. And so I play around with ChatGPT just to see what they've got, because you got to see who your competition is. And I'm not impressed.
I do it for free.
What's that?
I do it with my friends for free.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I'll just add to that. I will say that is a big part of the work that I do too. And there's a big shortage of people who are able to offer those services. A, B, it's getting more and more expensive and out of reach for a lot of people. So having a supportive tool that can help give people instant access to that, stopping the reactivity in the moment and helping them to think, it's just going to be a supportive tool to expand or productize what we do, which I think ultimately is going to help reach more people.
Yeah, and it seems like, the whole idea around psychedelics is to keep an open mind and not let our rigid patterns get to us. So maybe part of this is embracing the future of technology and seeing how it can help us and how we can work with it. So I want to get to Andrea in a second, but first I want to hear from you, Gianni, about the medical model, or I don't want to say medical model, but the model that you see as one that you want to fully embrace in psychotherapy going forward. We talked about that sort of holistic model, but what does that look like, and what would you get really excited about?
I would like all therapists to be trained in alternative forms of therapy, in functional medicine. I would like it, unless you're a person who has expressed that you're going to harm yourself or someone else, I would like you to have a full blood work panel before you are prescribed a medication. Your vitamin levels checked, because there's so many different things that could be imbalanced in the body's hormones, vitamin deficiencies, and those things can greatly explain why someone feels tired all the time, but they could be misdiagnosed as someone who's experiencing some depression. I'd like there to be more education on grief, because grief mimics chronic depression as well, and I think because we're forced to go back to work so quickly after either the loss of a loved one or loss of something that's important to you, we're not really learning as a society, as a collective, like how do we process disappointment and grief. And if we're able to learn those things in school, then we'd probably see a lot of less mental health disorders as a whole. If there was a community-based way for young people to talk about emotions, to talk about things that they might have gone through, then maybe we wouldn't see as severe levels of PTSD when they become adults. So I'd like to see that changed. I'm just going to put the idea out here because I know there's some UT professors here. I'd like to see an alternative healings class at UT, because I think it'd be a great elective for people to talk about the importance of community and health and alternative therapies. These ladies right here are perfect examples of people who didn't go to school to be a therapist, but I have no doubt have made just as big of an impact on the world. No doubt about it. So I think we need to also think about people of color and what are some shorter educational paths that we can take to get people of color to have some sort of certification on how to support people with their emotions without having to get a master's degree and then take supervision. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it has to be so hard to learn how to help people, especially if that's a person that the community trusts and that's a person whose intentions are good. They want to help. Their heart is in the right place. I think it would be cooler if like people who are business professionals could get some sort of certification in how to help people with their mental health, because our community needs role models, people who are doing good, amazing things in other fields. I don't think mental health and helping people with their mental health should be reserved for those who like went to school to be a therapist, if that makes sense. And this is my last thought, I promise. I think stand-up comedy is therapy, and I wish that we incorporated comedic therapy into our education as well.
Love it. Improv, yeah. Andrea, I'd love to hear a little bit about the nonprofit that you work for, that you've created actually, and how that blends community and integration. If you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it wasn't born, it's called She Is Me. It wasn't born as a tool of therapy, but I think it has helped many relate to others. And the way it's thought is it's a timeline where when we're young, we have an exploratory phase, we are curious about everything, we ask a ton of questions. I still today ask a ton of questions. My husband's highly annoyed by it. But I do always am trying to understand the world around me better. And when you are in that early stages of life, you always and very often seek for a role model. Someone to look up to, someone that might look like you or might want to be like them when you grow up. You want to have that career. Anything that strikes you about them can trigger your inner willingness to do anything that it takes to be that in sports, in a career, in anything possible. You never know what's going to stick. It could be a day at the zoo, or it could be a basketball game or a volleyball game, anything. And then the idea started because my husband coaches at the University of Texas, and when we go on the road, there is a lot of young girls that look up to his team. His team doesn't really know their role models, not yet. They're going through their inner struggles of being 20, not knowing who they are, not knowing what they stand for, not knowing who they are outside their sport they play, and the classes they have to go to. But that is where the later part of She Is Me comes in. People that have gone through that have passed the stage of questioning yourself and wondering who you are, what you stand for, what's important for you, look back and they say, she's me when I was in college. So there is an acceleration in the progress of understanding yourself and asking yourself the questions that are outside your curriculum in school and your sports-related agenda. When you think about the people that are in college and that are student athletes, they don't have any other time to explore necessarily any other passions or hobbies. And the reality of it is not a lot of them end up being professionals. So they have to go through the process of understanding who they are, being integrated in community, when all they thought for the past 13, 14 years of their lives is the sport they play. They go to class, they go practice, they want to be the best at what they do. And once they are lucky enough to go and play in college, let's say injury enters the picture, or they're done with their degree and they don't progress into the professional career as an athlete, they have to start and ask themselves, who am I? What do I want to do? What are my passions? And I don't know. So we've seen a lot of women go through their identity crisis as they finish school and they don't know what to do. We have an open door policy in our home, so they come to us a lot and they rely on our experience. They ask a lot of questions. But through She Is Me, we partner mentors to mentees in a way where they're aligned whenever they showcase the interest in business or they showcase the interest in social workers, they want to be educators. They just don't know what it looks like. They think that success is a linear path and they want to, let's say, be a professor and they just go in a straight line to be a professor and they don't know if they can be moms. They don't know if they can do anything else outside that route that they think success might look like. So through the mentorship programs, they're understanding that there is non-linear pathways to success, and it really all depends on what you really like, what your passions are, and asking those questions early on in the tail end of their teenage years, early in their 20s, helps them morph a secure identity as women when they finish school.
Thank you. Before we open up to questions, I just want to mention two things I'm really excited about, which is psychedelic societies. And I'm really grateful that you are all here because I think in some ways psychedelic societies, psychedelic communities, peer-based communities can really be a fallback for a lot of things that happen, whether it's in therapy or in life, a safe space for people to come together and witness each other from different walks of life. So I just want to thank you guys all for being here. Not everyone is part of the psychedelic society, but I'm hoping that there's going to be a reemergence of these groups where we can support each other. And I think for me, the other thing is, we haven't really used the word spirit at all tonight. And I work for a church. I mentioned work with veterans and first responders and civilians too, but finding ways where we can explore spirit and connection to self and God, whatever that may mean for you. So I think it'll be really powerful to see where we can reconnect with that. And oftentimes psychedelics do help us find more connection with that. So thank you guys all. I'm curious if anybody has any questions. We're going to open it up for questions. Do you want to share? I'm wondering if one of our volunteers can pass the mic around. Michael, yeah.
Do you guys see like breath work or like somatic experiencing being part of your guys' practice or working with other people that like do that? Like how does that play into like the mind, body, spirit aspect?
I think that's a big part of the integration of the body and the nervous system is connecting you back to the body, to the breath. A big focus of TAP integration is connecting people to the right facilitators because there's just as many different types of breathwork facilitators as there are other types of facilitators, some that really are great at ramping people's system up, and then others that are really good at helping them to become more restorative. So again, bringing it back to what people need to their bio-individuality and helping them to have access to the facilitators that are going to be the best fit for them. So it's a huge, huge focus.
I'll just add something really briefly too, is that sometimes I think the point of the medicine is to realize you don't need the medicine and that the medicine is within and that the breath can be the medicine and that we have that to regulate our nervous systems when we are in a psychedelic journey, but also when we are in a really intense situation in life. So when I work with people as part of a group, like we use it as a preparation technique beforehand so they can learn to regulate before they're even deeper in. So
in my experience, I've witnessed working with teams that have a very busy schedule before transitions, and I think this a lot of you in the room can relate when your day is back to back to back to back. We've incorporated a 5-minute eyes closed, everyone's laying on the ground, shoes off, breathing on your own. Sometimes music, sometimes not. Sometimes a word is given to think over and try it when you find yourself drifting your thoughts into what am I doing next, kind of like grasping onto that, makes a lot of difference in the way they feel and perceive stress. They have these questionnaires that they go through before and after practice. Perceived stress, perceived hard work, perceived how hard practice was. And it's very interesting, the data that our computer science and our sports science department gathers on how much of that impacts how you progress into your activities. throughout the day. So I think it would be something amazing to integrate and incorporate when you feel overwhelmed, in moments where you think that there's not enough time in the day to accomplish all the things. There is always 120 seconds you can take to yourself, and really making that a priority, it can shift the way you live your day. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't know where the mic is. You got it? Okay. Any other questions for the group? I think there's one back there.
Hey, folks. Thank you so much for speaking tonight. Olivia, my question is specifically for you as somebody who is at the intersection of tech and mental health. So I have been in the tech industry for the past 4 years. I've chosen to leave because I feel so emotionally exhausted by the space. So I'm very curious as to how you can see such a harmonious relationship between the two, because right now I see them very much so at odds with each other.
So in a couple ways, one of them is, these little reminders and check-ins that help you to go through that breathing sequence that Andrea was just talking about. I think that the more you integrate mind, body, heart, and spirit, you are more able to live in the world around us. You have less anxiety when you go out and encounter other people. You have less depression that keeps you wanting to be holed up and hermiting inside of yourself and inside, which both of those things are important parts of our life, right? Those are just messengers that are telling us where we're at in that moment. But the idea behind our technology is to help people to become more centered, more in alignment, so that they can live happier lives away from technology. So if we do our job right, we're enabling people to want to move away from their phones and connect better with other people because they're able to relate better to others.
Oh. Anyone else? I think down in front.
I'll just steal a mic real fast, but one more quick question. Do you guys think that the increase of technology in our world is creating such a dopamine desert as a buzzword that I've heard? Like, how does that impact your practices and your clients that you guys see or people you interact with?
Absolutely. And it's very difficult as somebody who currently works with children to determine if chronic inattention or fatigue is due to overuse of technology or not, if it's biological. There's a lot of disorders that we actually don't know the true source of. We just know it's a thing. But I can definitely see that there's an increase in anxiety, depression, ADHD right now, and it's hard to really pinpoint what's driving that. But I can say that when kids specifically are using less screens, they tend to be better with relationships and focus. I also think that technology is amazing, right? Love it. But it's changing the way we socialize with one another, how people find their next partner. And it's very, very difficult to manage, engage what is a helpful tool versus what is something that's harmful and changing us and changing what's natural. Does that answer your question?
In my opinion, in technology and in phones specifically, it comes down to how much you respect yourself. If you identify that is a problem, it would be something that I personally practice when I find myself neglecting the world that I live in because I am on my phone so much, whether it's for work, because it's convenient, because I want to be brain dead, whatever the reason might be. I ask myself this question often on very important topics, like, am I respecting myself by engaging in this behavior? And I think it's a good meter to judge, oh, maybe I spend too much time on my phone, and do I really need to? I had an eating disorder growing up, amongst all the emotional coping mechanisms that I developed due to my trauma. And it was very important for me to not engage into a immediate reaction when I was upset or when I was really happy or when I was really sad. So I thought for 5 to 10 seconds, do I really want this? Do I really need this? is this going to serve me in a positive way? And I hope that helps if, you could think in the back of your head, oh, maybe will I be able to respect myself if I don't engage in this behavior, or, I don't give the time of the day to this as much. Do I really need this?
I try to get curious about why I'm engaging in it. What is this behavior protecting, and getting curious and compassionate about it. So, yeah. There was one more. Oh, go ahead. We have one more question.
I had
Leanne.
one thought about it. So I think technology connects us all, but it's changed our culture in the sense that when you're waiting in line to do anything, most people are on their phones, or if you're waiting for a meeting to start and all your coworkers have their phones out, then you're missing out on that sense of community that could dramatically improve how you feel. So I think that's why technology has been limiting. Limiting. That's the word.
One more question in the front. Do you still have a question, Ms.?
Thank you. Yeah. First off, thank you so much for being here and for sharing. This is just awesome, and I'm so grateful to be able to learn and expand knowledge. So my question is this. I really related to what you shared. I also have a Latina background. I'm half Mexican. And for me, it wasn't possible to finish school. I had to drop out of college because my family needed me to help them and support. I ended up getting a job as a behavioral therapist for autistic kids. And so I dedicated myself to doing that and supporting my family. And never went back to school. And I'm super grateful because I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things that I'm deeply, deeply grateful to God, spirit, whatever universe we want to call that. And my question is this. So I have like multiple certifications. I'm certified in therapeutic bowls and sound healing. I'm certified as a kindred meditation facilitator, which is a somatic, creative, movement-based and human connection practice that's really, really cool. So I also loved what was shared about the importance of movement and somatic practices in the healing process, and thank you for sharing that. And then I was also initiated as a mujer medicina, a medicine woman. I've been living in Mexico for the last 3.5 years, studying with Huichol and Mexica and Mayan elders. My question is this: what is the view of the people on this panel of people who have found alternative paths that don't involve a degree? Because I don't have a degree to put on my website to say this is my fancy title and my fancy master's, for sharing medicine or for sharing space. I guess that's my question. And where do we see that moving forward in the future?
I can start. As someone who works in different modalities, I do not have a degree, and I feel like I've done a lot of trainings and I've sat with people in the most traumatic moments, and that is a training in itself. And I think when Olivia mentioned this early, some of the most important things is not necessarily the degree, although I think that's really important, and making sure that for safety, for responsibility, for some standardization in some cases, that people learn how to work ethically and responsibly and understand harm reduction. I'm talking about specifically with psychedelics, but with anything, with breath work, deep trauma can come up, and making sure that if someone is working with a facilitator, they understand that person can hold space for that. So I think some of those questions may come up in the next panel too, and as we discuss how things are going to evolve with the medical model not quite getting there yet. So that's what I have to add.
So I actually became a social worker because I loved working with foster kids. I was a yoga teacher and relationship coach and had no intention of doing all the things to get licensed. But I wanted to be their therapist, and I found out that I needed to go to school to do that. So it was a very long process. I think it ultimately depends on who you work with. I think there's space to not have a degree and make a huge difference. And I had the pleasure of getting my life coach training through 2 social workers and someone with biopsychology as a PhD. So it was really helpful to kind of have a crash course in the skills that they use on a day-to-day basis, because obviously they went to school for 5 to 8 years, but they were able to kind of create a coaching program that push all the most important and useful tools into like a 1 or 2 year program. So I think it's about finding a training that's held by people who are capable and have all the degrees and things, and then also trusting that your people will find you. There's so much space for you. I mean, there's so much to go around. So I wouldn't let not having a degree discourage you. You've already made a difference.
Yeah, adding to that, I would say there is always a hierarchy of severity of things that you can treat and you can't. Obviously, if someone needs surgery, we can't heal them holistically. They need to go into surgery. But if there is things that you can create into your solid community, into putting the heart that you are putting into, and it sounds like you're very passionate about the things that you do, people will resonate with you. And at the end of the day, if you do it because you want to make an impact in someone's life and help them be happy and shine a little bit of light in their lives where there is not, or there is a little bit of somberness, you are already doing that. And if you ever need or feel that you need to have a degree or a title, the world can probably help you if you ask.
I just want to add to that. I think it's really exciting that we're just seeing a gigantic shift in the paradigm of therapy in general, even the way that licensed therapists relate to their clients or patients, in the way that they're opening themselves up more for more connection, as opposed to just like a stone wall or just someone that's just there listening. There's more rapport being built, more relationships being built. So we're seeing a big shift from the old paradigm to the new paradigm, which is exciting. And we're also seeing the industry open up to all of these different modalities that can be used for therapy, like sound healing and different types of facilitation work. I'm really passionate about making Austin the epicenter for the psychedelic movement, and I would say that we already have built such an incredible ecosystem with what Caitlin has been doing with Psychedelic Society of Texas. Whitney, Mary, and I have a big event during South by called ACT, where we bring the community together of facilitators, and we're planning on doing a conference for facilitators as well, just to continue to encourage people to step into their specific gifts and the way that they can be of service to others. And I think the more that we encourage each other to do that, the bigger difference that we're going to make in the world.
Thanks, Olivia. Really quickly, where can everyone find you? Where website-wise, how can people reach out to you?
My website is tapintegration.com. You can find out more about the software platform and sign up for our newsletter. We always send out some incredible tips for integration, as well as where we're at with the launch of this product.
I'm actually an entrepreneur. So you can find my business at tiyproducts.com, or you can just reach out on Instagram, Andrea Nusete Elliott. If you just want to connect personally, you can always find me there.
You can find my info at gianniluisi.com. And if you just search the Psyched website, you'll see how to spell Gianni Luisi.
Thank you. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Psychedelic Society of Texas, it's PSYTEXAS. You can sign up for our newsletter and keep apprised of community events. And then I also work with the Illuminating collective, theilluminating.co. So we work with veterans and first responders and civilians as well. So feel free to reach out there. We do need to wrap up. So thank you guys so much. We're going to take a quick break for about 10 to 12 minutes, before our next panel. So feel free to mingle, get a drink, go to the bathroom, and then get ready for the next panel, the main event. Thank you, guys. Thank you to all our panelists. is the other microphone? If you have it, could you bring it forward? Hey, everybody, we're going to get started in 1 minute, 2 minutes. So please take your seat so we can get started. All right, everybody, please take a seat. We're going to get started. You could. All righty, please silence your chatter. We're going to get started with this panel. If you can hear me, clap your hands once, twice. Thank you. To some of you who were not here at the first panel, my name is Caitlin Riley, and I'm the co-director of the Psychedelic Society of Texas. I'm also a facilitator with an organization in town called the Illuminating Co. We work with a lot of veterans and first responders. I'm very grateful to be here and to be navigating this conversation and discussion with you. So I'm going to start by introducing our guests. We'll start with Rick Doblin. Dr. Rick Doblin is the founder and president of the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, otherwise known as MAPS, which has become one of the leading organizations behind modern psychedelic research. A pioneering activist, he received his doctorate in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and he has dedicated his life to legalizing and researching psychedelics. Welcome, Rick. Han Ren, Dr. Han Ren is a licensed clinical and school psychologist, consultant, speaker, and educator with a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in school psychology. She is deeply rooted in liberation and anti-oppressive work, practicing from a justice-oriented, interpersonal, culturally humble, and systems-informed framework. She co-leads Pivot Psychology, a group private practice in Austin, and has been featured on the TEDx stage, the Headspace app, BuzzFeed, and Huffington Post. Welcome, Han. Dr. Greg Fonzo is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Texas at Dell Medical School. He's the co-director of UT's Center for Psychedelic Research, which is currently conducting several on-site clinical and observational trials with psychedelic medicine. Welcome, Greg. Stephanie Washburn. Dr. Stephanie Washburn is a neuroscientist and psychedelic science advocate with a PhD in psychology from Texas A&M. She is an experienced clinical research and medical affairs professionals with a proven ability to bring products to market, facilitate communication of key clinical study results, and promote successful physician relations in assigned territory. She is also the online director of the Psychedelic Society of Texas. So welcome, Stephanie. So there's a lot to talk about tonight, and we're definitely not going to get to everything. So we're just going to go with the flow. But there's so much to talk about, and this is really like, there's a lot to get into. So we're just going to kind of start and see where we flow. But we're going to be talking a lot of different things, from FDA approval to ethics to integration to cultural sensitivity to the future of psychedelics. So grateful to have you here tonight. We are going to start with Rick and just get the lay of the landscape. Last time I saw you was South by of last year. You may have been back to Austin since, but on one of the panels, you seemed pretty confident that MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD would be approved by the FDA through Lykos. Most of us know here that that did not happen, and it has been rejected for now. So I'm curious if you could share with us some of the lessons and just what you've learned through the process. And also the key word being of tonight's discussion really is psychotherapy. So how does the word or the concept or the practice of psychotherapy fit into what has happened as well. So feel free to speak your truth and share with us what you'd like to share.
Well, I'll thank you all for being here. I'm really glad to be here with you today. And it was a complete rejection that we got from the FDA. It was worse than any of us anticipated. Part of it was clear because there had been a cascade of sort of criticism, negative media, negative articles, questioning articles in scientific journals. And so I think the key mistake that was made by our pharma company was to assume that the cultural change had happened so far that now it was just a rational process, and all that mattered was the data. And that if that's all that mattered, then they were saying that we're traditional pharma people, and in the traditional pharma world, we have, quote, a quiet period in this period before even before you submit your final data to the FDA. So about a year and a half happened before the FDA decision, and this quiet period was based on thinking about traditional pharma drugs, where they're administered to a few thousand people. Nobody really knows much about them. There's no illicit use. You know, right now, 22 million Americans have tried ecstasy or MDMA, what they hope is MDMA. So this idea that you could just well, most of the time, or a lot of the time, the MDMA that you might buy is not really MDMA. If anybody tries to sell you MAPS MDMA, which we've heard a lot of people are selling MAPS MDMA, it is not MAPS MDMA. I have never done MAPS MDMA myself, much as I wanted to. We've had the purest MDMA in the world, but I've got enough illegal access that I don't want to take legal to illegal. So I think the fundamental mistake, but it's amazing how many people have come to me, oh, I bought MAPS MDMA and it was really, really good. I was like, well, you've been told a story. But I think this idea that the culture is really more important than the science. And the culture is what blocked psychedelic research for decades and decades. And so I think that was the core mistake, was that the pharmaceutical company didn't engage with the critics, didn't engage. Now, one of the criticisms was, oh, our psychotherapy is hard to understand. FDA doesn't regulate psychotherapy. And our therapy was anything goes, and, you know, it's really nebulous. So that is not the case. So I think what happened again here is that the pharma company didn't properly explain to this FDA advisory committee meeting and to others that we have a highly standardized therapy. It's based on, we talked a little bit in the panel, you were talking about the inner healing intelligence. That's just a concept to explain that we believe that we support whatever's emerging. And that comes from this belief that there is this wisdom to the psyche. We all know that our body heals itself under our level of conscious awareness. So it's just a theory that this idea happens in our psyche, and that it comes with this confidence. Then when difficult material comes up, what you do is you support people to express it and to experience it. And you don't need to have this idea ahead of time, oh, you're going to talk about this then, or we're going to experience this, or you're going to cry, or you're going to scream, or anything. It's just whatever is emerging, we encourage people to support it. And so we have this manualized therapy that is available for free on the MAPS website. If you want to learn our treatment manual, we've operationalized it into core competencies that have turned into adherence criteria that are numerically quantified, and we've trained a bunch of adherence raters to watch the videotapes of the therapy sessions. So I think this idea is that the FDA does not regulate the practice of medicine. What that means is that if you are a doctor and something has been approved, you can prescribe it for other things than what it's been approved of. That's called off-label. So the FDA doesn't regulate the practice of medicine. Similarly, they don't regulate psychotherapy at all, but they don't need to. Because one of the most important things in psychotherapy outcome research is that the critical factor is not the school of therapy, but it's called the therapeutic alliance. How much the therapists have been able to help the patient feel safe, how much they feel. We heard it also in the previous panel about, do you trust them? Do they understand your life experience? So the therapeutic alliance is more important than the school of psychotherapy. So the way in which we would do the phase 3 studies, and the way in which we thought it would be approved post FDA approval would be that the therapist would go through the training of what therapy was used to make it into a medicine. What was that therapeutic approach? Once they've done that, then they're free, basically, to practice whatever kind of therapy they want. And that's the similar as off-label. So this idea that FDA doesn't regulate psychotherapy is really just a red herring. They don't need to, nor should they. That's regulated by state medical boards, by the sponsors that have developed the therapies. One of the other big things that was a problem for us was this idea of what they called functional unblinding. So how do you do a double-blind study with psychedelics? That's what I spent a lot of time in my dissertation was, how do you do a double-blind study? And I'll try to make this short, but it's a complicated question. But basically, if I were to, if half of you were to, well, if everybody were to have a pill underneath your seat, and half of them were a placebo that did nothing, and but one day we'll be there, but right now we're not there. So this is just in your imagination. But half of you,
Stickers are really LSD tabs.
yes. So, something was either psilocybin or MDMA or LSD. The other half was nothing. You would almost not 100%. Some of you would be confused, but not very many. And for example, we did this assessment in our second phase 3 study. Of the people that got the MDMA, over 90% were sure they had MDMA. And some were unsure, but very few thought that they had the placebo. Of the people that got the placebo, 75% were sure they had the placebo, 20% thought they might have had the placebo, and only 5% thought they had MDMA. So how do you do a double-blind study with psychedelics that produce such strong effects? The solution that I came with in my dissertation was this idea that you do therapy with low dose of whatever it is versus therapy with full dose. And the challenge is, how do you find the low dose that's high enough to start having enough of an effect that you might confuse it with a full dose, but not so high that it's so therapeutic that then you get all these benefits, you can't tell the difference between the two groups. So we did 16 years of phase 2 pilot studies looking at this question. And we looked at therapy with no MDMA versus therapy with 25 milligrams, 30 milligrams, 40 milligrams, 50, 75, 100, 125, and 150. And the way that we do this in the research is that after 2 hours or so, people can take half the initial amount. So that's really just to prolong the experience. So what we discovered from all of this was that the low doses, so microdose doesn't work, obviously, because you won't be able to notice anything, so you're not going to be confused. But the low doses in the 25, 30, 40, and 50 milligram dose range made people uncomfortable. Now, these are not healthy, normal people. These are people with severe PTSD, and they've struggled with the most difficult things that have ever happened in their life. So what you get is this activation without enough of the fear response. So they still got better, but they didn't get as much benefit as the people that had therapy with no MDMA at all, which was a surprising finding. Then the other surprise was that the dose that was really effective was lower than we thought. So we did a study, you talked about first responders. So we did a study with veterans, firefighters, and police officers. But we didn't know that we would get a police officer. It was just political that we said, oh, it's going to be for police officers too, just to communicate that. But we did get a police officer. But what we found is that in this particular group, the 75 milligram dose group did even better than the 125. Now, when you do randomized control studies, it doesn't always end up equal. So the people that had the 125 had much more depression comorbid with the PTSD than the 75. So that may have impacted it. But what it's shown is that we could not find this sweet spot where the drug that would cause the amount would cause confusion, but it wouldn't either compromise or enhance the therapy. So we went to the FDA in this 8-month special protocol assessment process, and we said that I was wrong. My dissertation, I thought I solved the problem, but I really didn't. I don't know that there is a solution. We said, we will give you blinding if you want blinding, but you're going to make our job easier, because the real question is, if you can do this with therapy and you don't need to add a drug, then that's the way you should do it. So we should test ourselves with therapy with MDMA against the therapy that's going to be the most effective. And that was with inactive placebo, and that's what the FDA told us to do. Now, what we didn't count on is that those people that at the FDA that we negotiated with left the FDA. And the new people are much more conservative at the Division of Psychiatry. We have actually won 2 formal disputes with this group at the division, where you hire lawyer scientists and they take it up to higher levels of FDA. So we were fundamentally criticized by the FDA Advisory Committee and others that they can't trust the results because the double blind didn't work. Now, actually, in psychiatric research, and this is what was told to us by the director of the Division of Psychiatry, he said the double blind is an ideal way to do it, but in practice, it fails all the time. And so with SSRIs, where you don't really have much of a psychedelic, you have no psychedelic experience, but there's a side effect profile with the SSRIs. And when the patients are talking about it, either to the raters or to the therapist, the side effect profile gives it away. Similarly, in antipsychotic drugs, in schizophrenia drugs, the side effect profiles give it away. So that
Can I give you 1 minute to wrap it up? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Kate. All right. So then there was another question that was one of the things that turned against us, which was there was a completely inappropriate, unethical boundary violation by one of the therapists. We had 400 patients. This was a situation that happened, as far as we know, one time. One time is way too many. That it's there should be, and there is, this complete barrier that patients and therapists should never have a sexual relation. It's inherently abusive. It should not be done. So that happened. And that was what was really brought up. Now, one of the things that happened was 2.5 years ago, and I'll do this in 30 seconds. 2.5 years ago, a group of researchers said, we want to study the role of touch in MDMA-assisted therapy, and we want to review the videotapes, and that will give us a sense, where is it appropriate, where is it not appropriate, where do we draw the line? And the pharma company refused to provide the videos. And they were fearful what it would say, and I said, look, if you're fearful what it should show, then you have a moral obligation to look at it. So what the pharma company did is, once the story of abuse was put out, there was nothing that they could really proactively say, we care about safety, this is what we've done, we've looked at the videotapes. So I think all of these different things built up to make it so that this advisory committee ended up saying, no, they recommended against it.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. I know there's so much more to say, so this is fascinating, and we'll come back to it too. I'd like to hear from a few of you guys about, Greg, maybe we'll start with you. In your opinion, just based on what you've heard from Rick now and just like the literature that you've read, what do you think the challenges to, this rejection were, or what,
So I think Rick,
Green button.
can you hear me? Okay, there we go. So I think Rick laid it out pretty well, right? A lot of the challenges there. And I think one thing that he said that was, I think, key is that the company itself, I think, didn't realize what they were going up against with the people that were really a little bit skeptical, right, of this line of research. I think in order to get a psychedelic drug across the FDA approval line, it has to be done with the highest level of scientific rigor in terms of the study design, the execution. And there were some issues, right? And some of it was probably not fair, right? The change in the FDA leadership or the people that they were working with. I think a lot of the issues that came up at the advisory committee are very sort of typical scientific issues that you run into with drug approval. Now, this is in the context too of the fact that this is a very atypical treatment modality, right? So how often do you have a drug and therapy combination going up for FDA approval? Not very often at all.
Never. This was the first time.
Never, exactly, yeah. And so, this kind of coming in is already sort of a confusing model for people. I think the other, if we're talking about psychotherapy tonight, which is really kind of the focus of the panel, I think one of the issues is the way, it's not necessarily the therapy and the way it was done, I think it was the way it was presented that was really confusing. Because the whole model itself was MDMA-assisted therapy, right? So you would expect that the therapy itself would probably be efficacious for the treatment of PTSD. Right, but unfortunately, that the MAPS model and the therapy that was used hasn't shown any efficacy outside the context of an existing a clinical trial with the combination of a drug, right? So I know we have the placebo condition, right? But the issue there is that you have large expectancy effects.
Well, except for, as I said, 3/4 of the people were 100% sure they had the placebo. And I just want to say that our results in the control group, they got therapy without MDMA with both, at least 95% of the people were either sure it was placebo or not sure. We're better than the results of any other existing therapy. We had 47.6% no longer had PTSD from the therapy without any MDMA. And also, we had a very, very low dropout rate. So if you look at prolonged exposure with cognitive processing therapy, these are the two main therapies used by the Veterans Administration and others. The VA did a study, took them 6 years, over 900 subjects. They compared prolonged exposure versus cognitive processing therapy. They had 50% of the people dropped out in both conditions. So it's very re-traumatizing. So our therapy without any MDMA has demonstrated in most of the people that were treatment resistant better results than any of the existing therapies. But it has never been studied outside of a clinical research.
Exactly, and it hasn't been studied outside the context of somebody receiving a pill, right, in the context of that therapy. And I think that's what you really need, right? You need to show, if you really want to validate this therapy as an efficacious treatment, it needs to be given without the expectation that people are going to be receiving a pill that may or may not contain MDMA, right? Because that's a big issue in regards to people's expectancy coming in. And also with the fact, too, that, this is the issue with clinical research, is that if you go to roll this out in the community, people are in the community are not going to be receiving it with the expectation that they're in a treatment study. Right.
I would say, though, that the expectancy effect of, I'm going to take a drug in clinical research, and I've heard this is one thing. The expectancy when you say, this is now FDA approved, it's even more, because now the FDA has said, this is proven. So I think the results that we got are not likely to be diminished post-approval. The expectancy will be even greater.
That may be the case, but I think the issue is that you got to do the study, right, in order to be able to demonstrate.
But the FDA never asked us to do. That's the other part. Is that if the we've done this therapy. I'm sorry to hog the microphone, but we've done this therapy for 24 years. We started in 2000 to do this therapy, so we've done this for 24 years in full knowledge of the FDA. And never once did they say, we don't trust your therapy, or you need to study it outside a clinical trial. And if the FDA advisory committee had said yes, the FDA would have approved it.
Stephanie, you're nodding your head over there, and I just want to hear from you about the pitfalls that a lot of companies face when approaching the FDA, or what you can learn, what you've gleaned from what Rick has talked about, and maybe what can be done next time, just based on what you know so far.
Absolutely. To Rick's point, I think it happens often in that you start with one group at the FDA, and trials are so long. Some of these trials can be 5, 6, 10 years even. And so by the end of the trial, you're dealing with a completely different group, and things have changed during the trial. Outcomes that were acceptable before are no longer acceptable. There's lots of things that can happen, as well as the political climate. Lots of things can happen in the FDA. So I think that that's a key piece of this. But I would also like to comment on, again, not only being scientifically rigorous, but the execution. The execution of the trial is almost more important than the scientific rigor in some ways. It's viewed that way by the FDA, as well as the safety profile. And so I think that companies have to be very vigilant and pick the right team. They have to start their conversations early with FDA, and not just early, but often, and keep communicating with FDA as they're running the trial, to avoid some of these pitfalls. And the second half of that is, clinical research is expensive. It is so expensive. Running a phase 3 trial will, you need up to 100 FTEs, and you're paying these people a lot of money. These are people that dot the I's, cross the T's, and it just takes time. It takes a lot of money. You have to assemble the right team, and you just have to be very cognizant of, the failures of others. So to Rick's point about the unblinding, I'm from the spinal cord stimulation space, so neurostimulation. We are plagued with this exact problem. So it's kind of like looking to other groups to see what they've done, maybe, and kind of the solutions that they've used because, these products, neurostimulation products, have been approved. So I think it's, again, just gleaning information that, from other groups that have gone through the same thing. But yeah, to Rick's point, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating dealing with FDA. I've been dealing with FDA for 20 years. I've never been on a call where we got initial approval the first time, ever. I've been involved in an approval that required 2 regulatory people from 2 different companies, in addition to escalating it up the chain, as you guys are currently doing. We've also been plagued with, and I don't know if this happened to you guys, but they will assign quote unquote medical professionals like a neurologist to a psychiatrist. Really, you need a psychiatrist to be on the panel, but you're looking at a neurologist, and the neurologist, bless their heart, they just don't know what the psychiatrists know. So, I think that's another issue, is them actually having the right people reviewing this.
Thank you. I feel like we could talk about this all night, and it actually is going to come back up, but I do want to just transition because I want to include Han a little bit here within this rigmarole of FDA, which is just very complex and fascinating. But I guess before we just transition, I'm curious, who here has had a psychedelic experience in the past year? Okay, what about the past month? Okay, so my point is that this is happening regardless of FDA approval. Whether or not it's always happening safely is another thing. But I guess where I want to direct this question to Han is that people, I imagine, are coming to you, having these experiences. Maybe some have told you, maybe some are telling you after the fact. But in your mind, what role has integration played in their success, or preparation as well, and how you work with them? And I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's definitely happening, whether it's regulated or not. And I think I've seen such a diverse set of experiences when it comes to consistency and differences in set and setting. We know that where you are and who you're with makes a huge difference in the type of experience you're going to get. And regardless of FDA approval, people are coming in with such a range of good and not so good experiences. So as a therapist, integration is a huge part of this process, helping them make sense of what it is that they experience, how this ties to the generalization of the day-to-day life, and how they can continue to find meaning making and reap the benefits even after the substance has left their body. And same with preparation, the expectations and the mindset that people go into it with really affects their outcomes as well. So not being able to really have consistency in that has been challenging as a psychologist, because I'm not really sure how to help people prepare or to make sense of their experiences in any sort of consistent manner.
And in terms of client safety, I mean, you're not facilitating them, but in terms of ethics and safety, in terms of what do you think are the best practices, maybe going forward for therapists to learn to hold that space, whether in an integrative capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many, curveballs that we can't predict for. We don't even know if people are getting the substances that they think they're getting, and that is a huge, ethical concern in terms of being able to prepare people. So I think, there's the underground, right? People hear from each other what the best guides are, but without any sort of regulatory messaging, it's really hard to know how to support clients besides just therapeutic best practices around spirit and self, connection to body, meaning making, and trying to find fulfillment. I think no matter what substance anyone uses to guide their healing, they have to be able to generalize it to the day-to-day. And if they're not doing all the other pillars of wellness, like taking care of their bodies and having social connection and community and hydrating, then they're not going to reap the benefits long term.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, Greg, like when we talked earlier, I don't know, I mean, integration as a variable in clinical research, has that been introduced so far? Has there been studies just on integration, or not just on integration, but as a strong variable? And how would that happen?
Yeah, so at the moment, there have not been, as far as I'm aware, any studies that have really systematically manipulated the integration phase to look at how that actually impacts the outcomes. So in my experience too, and just from, or my opinion, I guess you could say, from reading through some of the protocols and the design, it's actually the most poorly conceptualized or operationalized part too of the therapy. I think the preparation, it's pretty clear what you're doing. You're trying to prepare people to undergo a drug-assisted therapy experience, building rapport, getting them comfortable with the therapist. The dosing session is obviously very much about keeping that person safe and being able to experience the effects of the drug in a way that'll hopefully be helpful for them. But the integration phase really is in my experience and opinion, a little bit ill-defined. And so part of that, I think, is, there's a lot of talk about plasticity, right? And sort of neuroplasticity being a process that may be upregulated by psychedelic administration, which is essentially the brain's ability to rewire itself, form new connections, and prune old ones. And so it would stand to reason then that what you do in that phase afterwards, after the psychedelic administration, might be the most actually critical and important piece of integration. And I know that, for example, there's a very famous researcher, Barbara Rothbaum, who has developed prolonged exposure, which is one of the treatments that Rick mentioned, who is doing a study looking at combining MDMA-assisted therapy with prolonged exposure. And that makes a lot of sense to me because of the fact that if we think MDMA may be catalyzing a certain internal process and or enhancing plasticity, that the exposure therapy that occurs in the aftermath may actually work a lot better for that person. So I think we need more studies like that, where we're really taking the existing treatments that we know work for PTSD, combining them with these novel approaches like MDMA-assisted therapy or other kinds of psychedelics. And really, the idea is we got to do the best for the patient, right? And ultimately that means taking everything that we have that's the best and putting that together in a way where we can really design a study to answer these important questions.
Thank you for that. And just a follow-up question, you had mentioned maybe some medicines are more inherent, you could focus on integration a little bit more, or you had talked about psilocybin, you're like, well, I think the most positive effects are immediately after. Do you actually believe that, or?
Yeah, so the data would suggest that when you give somebody, if we switch gears a little bit and talk about psilocybin, that in the clinical trials up to this point, the largest magnitude effects that you see in people's symptoms are generally right after the dosing session. So the day, or maybe the few days after.
What would you say effects are? Just positive,
Oh, yeah. So you see a reduction in symptoms of depression,
Yeah.
and the effect size magnitude is essentially how much that changes, right, from the baseline. And so what that would suggest is that, that particularly for psilocybin, that a lot of the large magnitude therapeutic effect is probably driven by the drug itself and the experience that people are having under the effects of that drug. And those large magnitude effects occur prior to actually any of the debriefing or integration, depending on, they call it different things depending on the study. So that gives us a lot of indication that, at least for psilocybin, that's really a drug effect, right? That we're seeing that really large magnitude change right afterwards. Now, it doesn't mean that what you do after that period doesn't matter, right? And I think that's important to point out. But I think what it does tell us, though, is that, at least for certain psychedelics, that there may actually be differences in the degree to which the therapeutic effects are driven by the drug itself versus something like, MDMA, for example, which is a much more relational drug, right? And so we don't know for certain about whether or not the effects of MDMA may be catalyzed more by that therapeutic process or that therapeutic interaction. But this is I think the very reason we need to do more of these studies where we begin to dismantle some of these different components to really understand what's driving the changes.
Thank you for that. Rick, I'm curious your reaction or just your perspective on integration as a tool and kind of what Greg's talking about.
Yeah, well, what we find is that once people have learned that they can handle processing their trauma, that it's not something that is so overwhelming that they have to keep blocking themselves from doing that, that the integration process helps them to do that without the drug afterwards. And we've done long-term follow-up studies where people keep getting better over time. So it is true that there's a lot of benefits sort of the day after. And we use that day after to bring more therapy. So we tell people that MDMA at least is a 2-day experience. The first day to do it, the second day to rest, reflect, and do more integrative psychotherapy. But people do seem to get better over time because then they learn how to do this on their own without the drug. So that I think the drug effect is a way that gives you a lesson, and then you can do that on your own, because there's no way that we can keep people from being re-traumatized in their lives, either directly or just seeing what's going on in the world. that it's hard to not be traumatized by seeing what's going on in the world. So this idea of the integration is something that really is critical, and then it gives people the tools to do it without the drug. I will say, though, one thing that I think is the field is getting the wrong message from the rejection of our Lykos's new drug application, which is that they should avoid therapy. That therapy is a complication, and so even with the COMPASS studies that you're doing, it's psychological support. And then we have the most outrageous one was Mind Medicine, which does work with LSD for generalized anxiety disorder. They claim we've completely eliminated therapy from the treatment. Well, they have therapists and doctors sitting with people the entire time. They do all the preparation. They're there to create a safety, so that a lot of the elements of therapy are there, even if they're not saying certain words, so that the company can say, to boost up its stock price, oh, we're not doing any therapy at all. But that is my big worry, that the field is getting this idea that it's not about maximizing outcomes for patients. It's about what do we do to get through the FDA. And that means, in many people's minds, minimize therapy, don't talk about it as therapy. And I think that's a tremendous loss.
Thank you, Rick. That makes sense. I want to switch gears a little bit, but it's still on the same note of integration. Han, you talk a lot about liberation psychology and decolonizing mental health, and I'd love to hear from you about that, what that means, if you can explain that to the audience, and on top of that, how it relates to the psychedelic movement and psychedelic healing.
Yeah, so liberation psychology is psychology for the oppressed by the oppressed. It very much takes into account systems of power and oppression, and it kind of gives a contextual focus to healing beyond just the individual. We all exist in systems, we all exist and are affected by the systems of power that are operating around us. And the traditional biopsychosocial medical model of mental illness very much situates the problem within the individual, and it ignores and depoliticizes the environment in which we live. And so much of our healing, especially in modern day, and so much of our suffering is impacted by the world around us. And we really cannot divorce the person from the environment in which we live. So decolonizing mental health really just kind of goes to the root and the etiology of how mental health and well-being can be conceptualized, and what are some ways that we can kind of strip it from its, blank slate, power differential, traditional Eurocentric models of psychotherapy, to bring in community and spirit and alternative healing modalities such as psychedelic medicine. And if we look at the history of the majority of psychedelic medicine, it comes from indigenous cultures, it comes from Latin America, from West Africa. So we really have to be mindful and honor the roots and history of where psychedelic medicine comes from and how we can integrate that into our more modern modalities of healing and modern psychotherapy.
Yeah, just to reinforce what you're saying is that in studies with PTSD, there's one measure called the clinician-administered PTSD scale that is the gold standard used by FDA, used by the European Medicines Agency, and it centers on what's called an index trauma, your worst trauma, and that's what you have to talk about. How are your symptoms with the worst trauma? So we've had several people that had racial trauma, that had so many different incidences in their life that they could not pinpoint which was the worst one. And we had to exclude them from the study because the measure itself was not designed to pick up that kind of trauma.
And I would say that most trauma is complex trauma that we experience. It's not something that happens big T one-time incident. It is the accumulation of small T traumas that happen throughout a lifespan, especially in the developmental stages of early childhood, and especially when it involves relational trauma and emotional neglect. Because trauma is not what happens to you, it's who you're with when bad things happen.
Stephanie, I'd love to hear from you because you, I think, bridge this amazing, it's an amazing bridge of your personal experience with, if you're open to talking about that, and being a neuroscientist. So I'm curious, where do you come at this and what you're the most excited about as we move forward in science, but also in what we've just been talking about, the sort of healing of trauma?
Absolutely. So just nodding my head about the complex PTSD. I work for a company actually using the CAPS-5R studying PTSD, and I had that exact same criticism for that measure. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD this summer, and it's been a journey. I was actually diagnosed with anxiety and depression when I was in my early 20s. I've been very interested in psychedelics since I was in my teenage years, and so that probably led into me becoming a neuroscientist, and also in addition to being diagnosed with anxiety and depression. So wanting to kind of, explore that and research that. I have found my biggest issue is that I've been on antidepressants for so long, for coming up on 25, 30 years now, that I want something different. And I want to go more natural. And I have had a real problem. It's been a real struggle for me to find someone who can help me try to transition off of antidepressants into something that's more natural, or at least even just take a break from the antidepressants. And then having been diagnosed with complex PTSD recently, that's it's interesting. People don't know what to do with it yet, I think. And so it's been a little bit of a struggle to kind of figure all of that out. And I'm hoping that, with the effort of the people on this panel, that, we can advance that knowledge. And again, like I said, we can give opportunity to people to steer away from traditional antidepressants, anxiety medications, maybe to something more natural, other things that they want to explore. It's amazing. The psychiatrists are even hesitant to give people lithium. They put me on low-dose lithium, which is a natural medication, and it's done wonders for me, wonders, with very little side effects compared to the antidepressants that I've been taking my entire life. So yeah, that's been my experience. Trying to get into Greg's trials, by the way. So you guys talked to Greg. Trying to get into one of Greg's trials. They denied me earlier this year, but I'm coming back with complex PTSD. So.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, so much. I'd love to hear from Greg right now about what you're excited about. You're working with these exact things, and I'd love to hear what you're most excited about that you guys are working on at UT, and where you see, the challenges and the excitement.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to be excited about. I'll say that. So I think the field got kind of hit this year, right, with the Lycos rejection, several other issues that came out the AdCom. But I think that's all to say that there's still a lot of promise, right, and still a lot of work to be done. So personally, we are very interested in a form of technology called neuromodulation, particularly at UT. So has anybody in here ever had neuromodulation? Okay, so we've got some folks in here. Yeah, so it's basically using energy delivery to the brain to try to affect a therapeutic effect. And so the most common form is something called transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's an FDA-cleared approach for treating treatment-resistant depression. And my thought is that, typically the sort of aftercare around psychedelics has been done primarily with psychotherapy, which is great, right? I think that's effective for some people, but we're really testing the idea that neuromodulation might actually be an aftercare approach that might synergize really well with psychedelics, because it's a brain-focused approach, right? And we know that psychedelics are having these massive effects on brain networks, synaptic plasticity, and so intervening in that period afterwards with something like neuromodulation may actually be a really synergistic combination. And so, I think it's been said before that psychedelics are, in some ways, they can be combined with a lot of different treatments, right, in order to have a therapeutic effect. And I think we've really only begun to scratch the surface with that, including, psychotherapy, which is particularly important, or psychological support, however you want to frame that model. But ultimately, I think what we need to do is move beyond that as sort of the sole and only way, right, that these drugs can be used, and begin to think a little bit more outside the box as well. So we're particularly excited about that and moving in that direction. I'm also particularly excited about the possibility of doing a study with MDMA that may actually hopefully address some of the concerns that were raised at the AdCom. And so we'll see. Hopefully that will also be coming in the near future.
Han, what are you most excited about?
I'm most excited to be able to continue to help people put in the reps in a consistent, regulated, systematic way. Just like going to the gym, you don't just get like really swole and then stop working out. You got to keep lifting, right? You got to put in the reps. And that's true for everything we do in life. And there's no silver bullet, there's no shortcuts. And I love that we are really coming up with these new ideas for how to heal really complex things like complex trauma, which, by the way, is not even in the DSM yet. That's how, it's so rampant, but it's such an underpinning of so many people suffering, but it's not even in the DSM. But I'm really excited that we are talking about this so, as a psychotherapist, we can better put in the integration and the ways that we can help people do the reps.
Thank you. Rick, we're going to end with you before we break to questions. I want to know what you're focused on with MAPS right now, what you're really excited about now that there's more of a separation from Lycos, and what drives you personally and what kind of projects?
Well, basically what I'm trying to do is everything that I hoped the pharma company would do, but is not doing, where they're just focusing on FDA, US, and they've abandoned everything else. So what MAPS is doing is working with around the globe with humanitarian projects. So I like to say that we go where the suffering is, where there isn't money, and the pharma company will go where the suffering is, where there is money. And so we're trying to do work in Somaliland. We actually shipped MDMA from Canada to Somaliland to train therapists there. We're trying to do work in Ukraine. We're going to be training therapists in Ukraine in March, and Syrian refugees we're going to work with. So I'm very excited about that. There's two things I just want to mention. The other is group therapy. So that in order to scale, there's just an enormous, we talked about it in the first panel, this enormous mental health crisis. And there's not enough therapists to deal with one by one. And also it costs more. So we're starting to do studies with group therapy around the world, and in particular in England and Israel. In Australia, there's starting to be group therapy for climate-related PTSD from floods. The Portland, Oregon VA is doing group therapy. These are 4 therapists for 6 people with PTSD, and then over time we'll be experimenting to adjust the number of PTSD patients with the number of helpers to see what's an optimal amount to do that. So I think that's really key to scaling. The other thing that we're hoping that Greg will like the idea of this is couples therapy with MDMA, and to maybe do this here at UT Austin. So what I've said often is that we don't just do science, we do political science. So what's happened is we have lost control of the narrative. The narrative has shifted. The media has shifted negative. The FDA has said no. So how do we regain the enthusiasm that people had, or the sense of hope? And so one of it is that we need to show that these psychedelics can help people where they most care about their lives, and that's going to be in relationships and in couples therapy. So it's a challenge because couples therapy is not a DSM diagnosis. So although it feels that way a lot of times, but it's not clear that the FDA would ever approve MDMA for couples therapy, although we think that with the right amount of lawyers and support from above, that maybe that would happen. But that this idea that people will really care about their relationships, and MDMA was used for couples therapy before it was even criminalized. And now I think it's one of the very best uses of it. But one of the challenges of it, and this maybe Greg you can also help us with too, is that successful couples therapy doesn't necessarily mean that the couple stays together. So the measures are based on, is the strength of the relationship, are they staying better? But they could mutually decide to separate, and that could be a success. So how do we actually study couples therapy? I think it'll be how people communicate, sort of process measures rather than do they stay together or not. But there's a possibility that we could do a couples therapy project here in Austin with MDMA, and that's what I'm super excited about.
Thanks for sharing that. So we have a little time, maybe 10 minutes for questions. I'm curious if anyone has a question. Maybe we can get one of our volunteers to work the mic. Thank you. There's someone here that had a question.
Hi, thank you all very much. My question today has to do with psilocybin. Over the years, I've noticed through talking with the community, members of the community, it seems to be that tryptamines specifically give the greatest effect for healing over depression. That's just been my personal experience, not of myself, but of talking to a few hundred people now. I'm wondering where psilocybin fits into this anymore, into the discussion. And if you could also maybe comment on the difficulty of capitalism and psilocybin and how difficult it is to integrate plant medicine into this system. Thank you.
Maybe I can let Rick take the capitalism question. I could talk a little bit about the science at the moment in regards to psilocybin. So MDMA and psilocybin are actually the two psychedelics that are the furthest along in sort of the drug development pipeline. So we're actually running a study at our center at UT. It's a multi-site study. It's being funded through Compass Pathways, which is one of these large pharma companies that is developing psilocybin, and it's for treatment-resistant depression. And so, like you mentioned, that the majority of the evidence base for depression, it lies in terms of psychedelics in psilocybin. It's interesting too, because it's the opposite in PTSD, right? So the majority of the evidence base is with MDMA. And it brings up an interesting question, right, about whether one is actually better than the other for treating the condition. And the answer is we really don't know because nobody's done that study. And it's probably largely a function of where people began in that process in terms of looking at MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for depression. So it's still very much ongoing. There are several companies producing some kind of psilocybin-like analog at the moment for depression. One of them is here in the U.S. They're called Usona. There's the Compass, which is a UK company, but it's looking like maybe in the next year or two, one of those drugs or formulations will go on for FDA approval.
Yeah, I'll just add that there is one person in America that has a license from the DEA to grow mushrooms for research purposes. The problem is that when if you have one mushroom out of a cow patty, it might be more potent than the one right next to it. So it's really hard to get from a natural material as precise of a dose as you get from synthetics. But it doesn't really matter that much. If you have 25 milligrams of psilocybin or if you have 23 or 27, it doesn't really matter that much. So the question will be, does the FDA open up to botanical medicines that have a little bit more variation than the synthetics would? So far, they have not done that, but they could. And so there is a source. So one day would be really interesting if you would, Greg, do this kind of a study where you compare synthetic psilocybin versus what you get from mushrooms. So with cannabis, there is an entourage effect. It's much different smoking the whole plant than isolated cannabinoids. But my personal guess is that with the mushroom versus synthetic psilocybin, that it would be almost identical. And that there are other elements in the mushroom that may have other medicinal effects, but I think the psilocybin is the main psychedelic effect. So I don't think you would see much of a difference, but that's never been studied.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Capitalism is about it's no longer about what's best for patients. It's about what's best for the shareholders, and that's a completely different set of priorities, and that's the problem. And so what we're hoping actually for Ibogaine, and this I'll mention here because you're in Texas, is that there's an effort to try to get $50 million from the Texas legislature for Ibogaine, and it's Rick Perry is sort of helping lead this. It might actually succeed. And if so, if it's public money, then what you can do is open science, no patents, and turn it into a generic. But if it's investor money, you're going to get patents. Compass is now, trying to patent the polymorph size and try to block other people from doing anything with psilocybin, not because they got a patent on psilocybin or a patent on psilocybin for the use, but because a simple thing about the particle, the crystal size, this polymorph form. So that's what capitalism leads to, is patents, pharma companies suing each other all the time, developing patents. So I think it's very anti-psychedelic. So the hope is, at least for Ibogaine, that Texas will allocate this $50 million. There'll be $50 million in private donations or something like that, or federal money, and then we could make Ibogaine into a medicine and turn it immediately into a generic. That would be the best, but it only has to come from public or donated money.
One point too, I just want to, I'm not a capitalist per se, but I will say that there are some advantages to it in regard to the fact that, people can get behind it, right? So it's easier to raise funds. Those companies are the ones that typically get the drugs past the FDA approval line. And they do go off patent after a certain period of time, right? So then they become able to be generic and become more widely available. So it is it's sort of like a necessary evil, some might say, in this area. And I just want to throw that out there too,
Yeah.
just to.
Well, to support that, just to say is that MAPS and the other companies that are nonprofits like USONA and others, since 1986, collectively, we've raised about $300 million in donations. In the last 4 years, $4 billion has been invested in for-profit psychedelic companies. So access to capital is one of the advantages of capitalism.
Thank you so much. I think what you just spoke to segues perfectly into what I'm curious about is how do we continue to hold the role of spirit, to look at the ancestral roots of these medicines so it doesn't just become a completely sterilized process. Because I know for myself, and I know I'm probably not the only one, when I first experienced psychedelics, it was a divine connection to the divine, to the goddess, to the god in all her many forms. So how do we continue to cultivate that even within this realm, right? Because again, why did indigenous cultures use these medicines? And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And anything personally, if you're willing to share some of your own connections to the divine and how that has fueled your passion in this world.
I guess it's me. What a question. I would say, that's where the role of the guides, the therapists, the coaches, the community, the spiritual leaders really come into play, because we cannot go through this world alone. We need each other. Humans are wired for social connection, and when we try to strip ourselves of that, that's when loneliness becomes an epidemic. And I think it's so important that we continue to flesh out what meaning making can look like, what fulfillment and connection to ourselves and each other can look like. And, that's probably why we have psychotherapy as the focus of tonight, is because we cannot separate community from the healing process, and not just community with each other, but community within ourselves. I think so much of us don't know how to be with ourselves, and that is something that the spirit and psychedelic medicine can really help us with. And I also want to add that, not to get political, but mental health is highly, highly political. There is an acceptance of certain spirit in our modern world, in politics, right? But not other types of spirit. And I think that is so reductionistic and siloed, and it really erases the beautiful indigenous, ancestral, shamanic medicine that so many of us here in this room are tied to. Because spirit is universe, and it's not something that is driven by any sort of dogmatic institution.
Well, I think it's essential, because how are we going to keep capitalism in check with for-profit psychedelic companies if there is psychedelic churches and also drug policy reform, so people can access on their own with peer support, with their friends. So those are, not only is there room for it, but there's necessary. But I would add one thing, which is that the research that was in the 50s and 60s with LSD and the 25 years of psilocybin research has demonstrated a correlation between the depth of the mystical experience, which you could say maybe is equivalent to spirit, and therapeutic outcomes. But that is not the case with MDMA. So we've used the same mystical experience questionnaire that's used in the psilocybin research that began with the Good Friday experiment in '62. And we show no real correlation between the mystical experience, which happens in MDMA more than you would think, but not as much as in psilocybin, which is why in our therapeutic approach, we support whatever is emerging, but we're not trying to steer people to a mystical experience.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that just the whole sort of, if you take psilocybin, you're going to have a mystical experience, kind of idea, I think has been a little bit too popularized by the media. So I think we're really working against a lot of, and there are some media people out there tonight, so I apologize in advance if I've offended you. But that's all to say that, and even in the studies that we do see that relationship, it's not always consistent, right? There are studies out there looking at psilocybin and mystical experiences, not seeing that relationship. So it's still very much an open question. But one thing I will say is that, I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at academia, so we don't talk much about spirituality in my sort of typical job environment. But that is not to say that I don't think that it is a legitimate field of scientific study. And we do know that, for example, people that have strong spiritual beliefs tend to do better over their lifespan in terms of well-being, as well as outcomes to various treatments. So I think there is certainly a buffering effect there, and certainly something that could be further explored, particularly even in the context of the sort of the medical model for psychedelic administration. Will psychedelics will they allow you to see God? Maybe, maybe not, right? It all depends on the person. But ultimately, I think it's something we probably need to pay more attention to, at least in the context of the research we do.
I've never seen God on psilocybin, or I'm not quite there yet, but I am hoping. Remember, I'm getting in Greg's trial, so.
So I encourage you to work with the night and be part of our storytelling and sharing sort of a circle about psychedelics. So thank you guys. Mingle a little bit, and we'll get started in 15 minutes. Yes. Hi again. We're gonna have a 15-minute break, and at 8:30 we will have the comedy show. So I'll see y'all then. Woo!
I was hoping we would.
Hello, everyone. It's time to find your seats. I'm so sorry. I have to end these amazing conversations or pick them up later after the comedy show. I love that. I love what I'm overhearing. I love the amazing conversations happening. But we gotta continue with the schedule. Right. Very important people having very important conversations. But I'm going to need everyone to find their seats right about now. I would like everybody to find their seats. There's time for questions afterwards. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Got to keep going. Got to keep going. Thank you. Thank you. But you know, I could see so many beautiful faces standing, but I'm going to need to see more of them sitting. You know, silence is the most beautiful collection of noises. If you sit in silence, you realize how loud it is sometimes. Has anyone ever done that? You sit under a tree expecting silence, and then you hear a bug, and you're like, whoa, it's in my ear. Okay, we did really good. It took us about 5 minutes to kind of be quiet. Awesome. All right, well, I am not a stand-up comedian, I would like to introduce the Comedy Mothership team. We're going to start with Christina Mariani. Woo! I like it. More woos. Woo! Beautiful. All right. You can handle the jokes from here.
Okay. Hi. I understand you guys like mushrooms. Same. I'm also a therapist. I do everything. I take the mushrooms and do the psychotherapy, and which is cool. I've been doing mushrooms lately. I'm going through a breakup. Anybody else? You too? Really? What happened? She didn't like you doing drugs? Oh, well, she sounds boring. Well, that's good. Now you can find someone who does drugs. There's a lot of people on 6th Street who can help you out. They self-medicate. But anybody else? You guys in a relationship? Yep, you guys married? Oh, are you gonna get married? You should, right? Does she not do drugs either? Yeah. Oh, so cool. That's fun. Doing drugs together is nice, unless you're dating a psycho and then you do Molly together and you can see all the lies. Has that ever happened to you guys? Like a bad Molly? You guys are nodding. You're like, yep. Wow, so many traumatized people. I love that. That makes sense. I mean, I feel like we're all like traumatized a little bit, right? Like when I was younger, I got beat. That's okay. We're in a safe space. Anyone else? You did? What did you get beat with? A belt? Belt, hand. Pretty good weapons. Anyone have anything cooler? Cables? Wow. Damn, cables. I've never heard that before. Like TV cables? Nice. That's good. My mom was really old school too. When I was younger, she would beat me with a wire hanger. But it's okay. She stopped once I was born. Pro-abortion crowd? I wonder if anyone's ever taken mushrooms to go get an abortion. Be kind of crazy. No, not that you can anyway here in Austin anymore. But I still see Planned Parenthoods around, so I don't know. Maybe for Halloween they were just using them as haunted houses or something. No, I don't know. I'm going through a breakup. I'm obviously very well adjusted. I don't know. I think he was gay. Because I caught him watching gay porn, so that's pretty gay, right? I don't want to be like closed-minded about it because I like watching lesbian porn, but I don't feel like that's gay. There's like a double standard. I feel like I like watching lesbian porn because I love seeing women get along. But it feels different the other way around. Like, you guys are together? Oh, why not? Oh, you're married, so you are. Oh, 2 other people. Of course. Where are they? I don't see them. They're like, you crazy kids, have fun. You guys are about to be married. If you caught your fiance watching lesbian porn, would you be like, oh no, maybe she's a lesbian? you would ask to watch with her, right? You'd be like, nice. Maybe she'll come this time. Maybe she'll watch Lord of the Rings next. I don't know. Since she already likes watching pussies on an adventure. But if you caught him watching gay porn, yeah, you don't know. Because it would be pretty gay. Well, okay, so I dated a gay guy. Whatever, one in Austin. Right? Date a gay guy. He was gay, but also a liar, you know? He's a gay liar. Because he tried to lie about it. He was like, no, it's not gay porn. It's jujitsu. I was like, I don't care how you say it in Chinese. And, now I'm just like out here, I'm single. I don't really want to date, but and it's hard for me to date anyways. I feel like I got the worst traits from my parents. Like my mom, she's really sweet, but I got her really awkward demeanor. And my dad is really smart, but I got his tits. So it's kind of hard for me to put myself out there when I got my mom's awkward demeanor and my dad's tits and and my uncle's attention. Any other people close with their families? Yeah, so I'm not trying to date. Maybe I'll have a one-night stand. That seems doable, right, ladies? Oh, thank you. Whore. Just kidding. No, I grew up Catholic, so I have kind of hang-ups about like having one-night stand. Is anyone Catholic in here or grew up Catholic? In the back, that makes sense. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, so it just makes me feel kind of guilty about everything. And like, also I didn't really get a good sexual like education. They kind of avoid that topic. Also, I don't know if you guys know, but when you're Catholic, you don't even need to have sex to get pregnant. God's just kind of like her. So when I was always really worried when I was a kid about just randomly getting pregnant. And then when I first started getting my period, I didn't know what that was. So I kept thinking I was getting miscarriages. I was like, why does he keep changing his mind? Am I not good enough? Pick me. No. It's growing up Catholic. My little brother is gay, so we grew up Catholic, and so he got lucky. I was in a confessional booth, and he was in a glory hole. Yes, I think that's why I have a fucked up sense of humor. Okay, you guys got it. That's good. Yeah, I kind of have a fucked up sense of humor. And I think sometimes I feel bad. But a lot of my fucked upness is on a subconscious level. Like, consciously, I think, I think I get, I'm not racist, but I get racist gut reactions. Does that make sense? So, I was walking home last night, and this black guy walks towards me, and my racist gut reaction was to grab my purse. Even though, logically, I know he's not for sale. He did steal my wallet, though. All right, that's it for me, guys. Thank you. I've been Christina Mariani. This next comedian coming to the stage, he's so funny. Please get up for Trey Stewart.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, keep it going for Christina. Yes. And how about a round of applause for shrooms, huh? Mushrooms. Is this the psychedelic kind or the other ones? Psychedelic. All right, that's what I'm talking about, man. Yeah, I fuck with it. Yeah, that's my kind of vibe with drugs. I'm a chill guy. You know, I fuck with the chill drugs, weed and mushrooms. You know, I've never done coke. Anybody done coke before? All right. Statistically, somebody's lying. Somebody's on coke right now. I've never done coke because it doesn't match the activities I do. Like, I just be chilling, you know. Like, nobody's done a line of blow then dove into a good book. You know what I mean? She's like, "Woo, it was the best of times. This is a good-ass book, nigga. Shit, oh." Yeah, I fuck with drugs, man. I just be chilling. I'm in a good mood. You know, I flew here first class. Spirit. So. First class Spirit, they just treat you like a human, you know. I hate flying, man, you know. Anybody hate flying as well? Yeah, you guys hate it. It sucks, man. I just get scared in the air. But you know what calms me down? The stewardess voice, they all sound so soothing, right? It's like they go through some kind of training where they're just able to make people feel good. Like, I'll be a little nervous and then I'll just hear, you know, the voice come on like, boom, boom, please remain seated while the seatbelt light is on. Thank you. I'm just like, no problem. I'll do it for you, anything for you, right? Like, it could be anything that would happen. I would just immediately feel better. Like, the plane could just drop out the sky. She'd be like, boom, boom, as we spiral towards our imminent doom, we'd like to thank you for choosing Delta. Delta, we almost made it. Which, you know, not a bad slogan, you know. I live in Austin now. Who lives here? Anybody live here? Yeah, fuck yeah, man. I just moved here. My bad. Yeah, a lot of people. It's too many people now. I fuck with it, man. You know, a lot of bums, though. Like, it's a different kind of bum out here. It's you got proud bums here. You know what I mean? Like, I had a guy come up to me. He asked me for money, and I cut him off. And he got mad at me for cutting him off. You know, he was like, "Excuse me, brother. I was wondering if you had any." And I just stopped him. I was like, "Look, man, I don't have any money. I'm sorry." And then the nigga got offended. You know, he was like, "What the hell? You don't even know what I was gonna say, nigga. Shit." And he just walked away. I'm like, what are you gonna ask me for the time? Your ass is out right now. Like, that's, yeah, excuse me, you know what time it is? 5:30. I was supposed to take a shit on 4th 20 minutes ago. I'm late. It's wild, man. One time I had a bum ask me for spare crack, which, you know, I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure that's not how crack works. Right? Like, if I got crack, I'm not giving any of it away, you know. The crazy part about that was that after he asked me, I told him no. He was like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I thought I was. Shit. Maybe you know something I don't." By the way, I don't want to offend anybody. You know, is this like a PC crowd? No? Good. Thank you. I just like to check, you know, because people get mad at words, right? You can't say bums anymore. Now you got to call them millennials. So it's all right, yeah. It's tough, man. Yeah, we got any couples? Make some noise. If you're anybody in love, make some noise if you're in love one time. All right. I like to look at all the late claps. You know, it's like, my hand was in my pocket, bitch. Hold on. I'm out here looking for love. Right now, I'm just fucking these hoes. Any hoes in the crowd before I move on? We got it. Oh, one clap. All right. Hey, you never know, man. Sometimes it is hoes, you know. You got to check. But I like meeting people in real life. You know, most people are on apps and shit. I think my favorite dating app right now is Venmo. Right? You just cut to the chase, right? Like, here's $50. You want to fuck me? No? Well, all right. I didn't have to put pants on. You know, I fuck with it. I saw a conservative dating app called The Right Stuff, which I might check it out, you know. It seems kind of cool. I want to start a dating app for conspiracy theorists called OK QAnon. I think that's might be fun, man. I don't know. Yeah, it's just tough. Yeah, I'm just trying to stay positive because, you know, it's a tough time in America right now, unless you're white, then it's going pretty good. And I do want to acknowledge that, white people, it's, I want to be a gracious loser. You guys won. If you're white, give it up for yourself. Go ahead. Come on. Come on, you won. White people are like, I don't know, can I clap for that? Or 60 more days and then you can clap for being white. Nah, yeah, you got to, man. I think we're all God's children, right? That's what they say. Plus, I think white pride is okay as long as it's supervised. I feel sorry for white people, man. Like, you guys are going extinct. Did you know that? Like, I didn't do anything, but I read an article that said by the year 2040, white people are going to be the minority in America. It's coming up. It is. I just feel like we got to let you know, right? Like, I think as a current minority, I feel like it's my job to fill you guys in. Right, real quick, you know how you got rights? Enjoy them. But on the flip side, your potato salad will be banging, so it's not all bad. Yes, right. That's what makes food taste good. It's oppression and salt, mostly salt. But oppression is in there, man. Now, we got to save white people. It won't be long before we start seeing sad commercials trying to save white people. Just be watching TV, you see a white woman just shaking, bunch of flies everywhere. Morgan Freeman comes out of nowhere for just 50 cents a day. You can save the life of one Becky. Just the cost of a pumpkin spice latte. Gotta save you guys, man, for real. Yeah, I like joking about race, man. I feel like most racism stems from ignorance, right? Like, it's not natural racism. It's learned behavior, right? Like, there's no such thing as a racist baby. It'd be kind of weird if it was, right? Baby comes out the mother's womb like, fuck Jews. Oh, my God. Put this baby back. It's not done cooking. It's got to cook the racism out, Yeah, like, I remember one time I was on the road, I met what I would refer to as a woke redneck, pretty liberal redneck guy. I think we were like in, Kentucky or somewhere. I was doing a show, and the guy came up to me after, and he shook my hand, and he was like, oh, you were hilarious, man. Thanks for coming out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. It made me feel good. And had he just left, it would have been a perfect interaction, but he kept going. He was like, oh, and by the way, I just want to let you know, I don't care if you're a nigger or not a nigger. That's me personally. So I was like, thank you, I guess, like, you can't get mad at him, Because it was, I like the message, He was like, I don't care what you are. You can be a jungle monkey, go ahead. Just don't fuck my wife. That's what he said. He said that shit. I wonder how many black guys must have fucked this guy's wife before he was like, I got to get ahead of this shit, brother. My wife is a whore, all right? She's going to try to fuck you, But yeah, no, it's good. It's cool, man. You guys see lovely couples. Are you guys together, obviously? Nice, man. How'd you guys meet? Oh, really? A psychedelic? Oh, damn. You know what? Is that what the hoes are? All right, I got to start getting high and shit. Yeah, that's it, man. What? I'm there. Where do I sign up? Shit, is that what site is this, man? Right there? All right, yeah. Fuck yeah, man. I'm here. I'm dating. Psychedelic church. You guys just get in a building and trip together? That's dope. All right, man. I'm sold. Let's go, man. Nah, for real. Like, I'm looking. Like, my last relationship was actually my first white woman. Hold your applause. I don't know. I thought it deserved something. Thank you. My whole life I dated nothing but black women, and then about a couple months ago they caught me slipping. My bad. I don't. Hey, listen, I put up some good numbers, man. But I had a good time. I'll be honest, man. I had a good time with my porcelain queen. It was we did break up on Juneteenth, so that was the only thing. What better way to celebrate Juneteenth than to set a nigga free? You know what I'm talking about? Come on, brother. It's more of a catch and release sort of thing. All right, look. You guys are awesome, man. That's my time. Are you ready for your next performer? Come on, make it loud for. Give it up for the hilarious Sam Lopez. Come on, let her hear it.
You guys give it up for Trey Stewart. And give it up for Christina Mariani. Oh my God. Aren't they great? Aren't they great? Hell yeah. I'm happy to be here. So stoked to see you all. I'm feeling pretty good. I had a stranger tell me I was pretty on the way here. Sounds nice. It was horrifying. Dude, he came up to me and he was like, hey, you're pretty. Be careful. Like, that's normal. Like, we're just out here passing out compliment threat sandwiches to ladies on the street. That's not happening to you, sir, right? All the time, people coming up to you like, nice polo. Keep your asshole tight. They are in Austin. Yo, I love this guy. Yo, he's so comfortable when I say keep your asshole tight. He's like, bitch, it's tight. You think it's not tight? Look at me folding my leg. Like, it is tight. Now, I know, I can always tell when someone's got a tight asshole. You can always tell. I grew up in church, so, you know, only the tightest assholes. Only enough room for Jesus, right? Yeah. White Jesus, obviously. Black Jesus has a little more to offer. Amen? I think you guys are the only witnesses here. Okay. I know there's a lot of white people here. If y'all have never been to Black church, you got to check it out. I'm just saying, their food's better, the music's better. Black Jesus has a really big dick. Amen? Yo, Black Jesus' dick was so big they had to nail it to the cross. That's my Jesus. That was a weird reaction. Someone went, ah. It was the white people. They're like, no, don't say that about my micro penis white Jesus. Man, I'm trying to get back into Jesus a little bit, you know. I went to Zoom church with my mom during the pandemic. You think it's going to be better with mimosas. It's exactly the same. She wanted to know why I'm no longer on fire for Christ. You guys ever heard this? It's something Christians be saying. They're like, I'm flaming for Jesus. Put him in my butt. I'm on fire for Christ. There's no equivalent in any other religion, you know? No one's going around saying, I'm exploding for Allah. They just walk the walk. I'd like to see a little more follow through from the Christians. I'm just saying. My mom could easily be on fire for Christ. She's soaked in vodka. That kind of hit people wrong. What else is going on? I'm a married woman. Any other married people here? You guys are married? Married? Hell yeah, we like it? That was not very affirmative. One, yeah. From someone I didn't even hear say they were married in the first place. All the people up front were just like, it's fine. Dude, I've been married for 1 year now. I just had my 1 year anniversary. Thank you. So I'm still new, but I've been with my husband for 8 years. We've been together a long time. And everybody always asks us, they're like, oh, what's the difference? You know, you guys live together and all that stuff. What's the big difference when you get married? And I'm like, well, my dad definitely knows I'm not a virgin now. We had such a good run. And now he's like all up in my grill about sex. He's like basically in my sex life. I get a call once a week. He's like, are you guys trying? I'm like, not now. You made him soft. You kind of ruined the vibe, Dad. Dude, on my wedding day, because I don't know what it is about getting married. People are like, oh, you got Jesus in the bedroom? I want to be there too. On my wedding day, my maid of honor, she asked me if I had any fetishes. I told her I like getting my nipples sucked. And she says, that's not a fetish. All women like that. Yo, is that true? Yes. What the hell? No one told me. Dude, I've been ashamed of that my entire life. I've never told another friend. I still to this day have not talked to my husband about it. We've never spoken about it. Dude, I do that thing that guys do when they want head. I'm always like, you know. But apparently we're all doing it. Apparently the nipple's the dick of the woman. Who knew? Who knew? Who knew we're all looking down at someone like, one day this will be my son. That is It's not so sexy now, is it? Kind of ruined it. You're going to think that tonight when you're putting those knockers in his face. Okay. I think it's a little fetishy. I mean, that's what I'm thinking, man. My husband is bald. That's exactly what my son will look like. I feel like I need to throw out some love to all the bald baddies here. Can we give it up for the bald guys? I know there's some bald dudes in the room. I see you, bro. See some guys with hats. You never know what's going on underneath there. See you. Look at this bald beauty in the back. Ugh. Body positivity is for everyone. You got to give it up for these men, dude. And I love seeing these super shiny guys. You got to go all the way, right, guys? You got to go all the way. Everybody wants to fuck The Rock, right? Nobody wants to fuck The Rock with George Costanza's hair. You got to go all the way. It's so cool because my husband, he just did the full thing. And I've never seen him be sensitive about anything before. He's like a really macho man. But when he talks about his hair, he gets real sensitive. He talks like a girl. Dude, he'll say stuff like, I just feel like society has unrealistic hair standards for men. Oh, that's so cute. Look at you. Feeling things. Dude, but he's so sensitive. He sees a guy with a full head of hair. Like, dude, if he saw you, bro, he'd be like, that's not real. Oh, there's a hat. I don't know what's underneath there. I thought you had a full head of hair, man. It's so dark. That is real. The real thing. Hell yeah. I thought you had like a ponytail, man. You look like a biker dude. I was like, cool. Look at this guy. Just full head of hair. No, that's cool. I like being married to him. He's a good guy. We've been together for a while. He's good at everything. That's what I hate. If you're not married yet, don't marry someone who's good at everything. It's really annoying. He's good at every game, every video game, anything with a ball. Dude'd be so good at being gay. He's great with balls. He's good at everything except for peeing inside the toilet. He doesn't excel at that sport. I don't understand how you could be undefeated at cornhole, but you can't get it in the toilet. And I see you two guys looking at me like, bitch, that's a different game. And I know, I've been like, what if you take like 20 steps back? You know? I don't know, it's annoying. I'm a woman. I think it's annoying to all women. We conceal a crime scene once a month. Why do you think we're so into true crime? We're trying to figure out how to get rid of that blood, you know? Do you go in my bathroom, your bathroom, y'all's bathroom? No blood. Never. Not a spot, not a drop. Dude, my husband couldn't do that. He couldn't get away with murder. Dude, they'd show up at the scene and they'd be like, you know, there's no prints, but there's piss all over the body. That is a fetish. Yeah, I love this guy. Dude, does he get it on the toilet? You wouldn't know? Oh, you guys don't live together. Cool. Keep it that way. That's what you want. You want to come home and your toilet's clean, man. Dude, I've been asking him to sit down. And I love looking at guys in the audience when I say that because they act like I'm like, oh, I would have cut his dick off. I want him to sit down, man. I told him my dad sits down, and he was like, why do you know that? I honestly, to this day, I don't know why I really know that. We were just watching football one day, and my dad was like, you know, I've been sitting down to pee. A lot of time to check your emails. I get what you ladies doing. I was like, that's not why, but yeah. No, he's got terrible aim. We're trying to have kids, and he's like, it's like he just keeps peeing on my back. He hasn't figured it out. Y'all have kids? Cool. Nice. I like this like timid, like I don't want to talk to you, but okay. 6? Yo, good for you. Give it up for that. Wow, it's horrifying thinking about what the physicality of having kids is and doing it 6 times. Yo, props to you, man. That's amazing. Was it scary? Were you nervous having them? You gave birth at home? Dude, so no epidural, just full on like, just pooped them out. Hell yeah. Oh my God. Dude, that's kind of what we want to do. We're talking about doing that. I have a friend who's a midwife, and we've been... Dude, and you weren't like in immense amounts of pain, screaming and yelling. No, you're just like, I've had bigger dicks in here than this. Dude, I'm scared, man. But I do want to have it. Do you have boys or girls? Dang, that's a lot of estrogen. that's beating out those men. Dude, I want to have all boys. I grew up in an all-boy family. I'm the oldest of 4 boys. I want to have all boys, man. I got every kind of brother you could want. Like, literally everyone is represented. I've got like a fratty brother. I got a brother with Down syndrome. I got a brother who's just a fucking idiot. The guy with Down syndrome is like, what the hell is wrong with him? Everyone thinks I have a problem. This guy joined the Navy at 32. Okay. Do we have Down syndrome people in our families or friends? Just not. Aren't they the best people? Dude, give it up for them. They're literally the best people. My brother with Down syndrome loves me more than anyone else in the world. He is the sweetest, most loving person. If you don't have one, just pick one up. They're great. It's like having a dog that can text you. It's the best. Dude, my brother, he texts me every day. I've been on stage like 10 minutes. He's texted me 3 times since I've been up here. That's real love, man. Yo. And people think they're not smart. They're so smart. Why do you think they look Asian? You know, like they're so smart. I don't respond to his texts. He went and he changed his iPhone information to Kevin Hart. He was like, oh, she won't respond to me? Let's see if she cares about her career. So my phone's just being blown up all the time by Kevin Hart. And I'm with other comedians and they're like, yo, what's Kev texting you about? And like, you know, the Flash, the space-time continuum. Maybe he's cool. He's like a ladies' man. She's trying to move out. It's weird talking about him because I know people are imagining like this young guy. He's 30. He's an adult man. And he wants to move out of the house, and they sat him down, and they were like, so we have like 3 different kinds of homes for, you know, people like you, Matthew. And we have co-ed homes, and we have all guys' homes, and then we have all women's homes. And he says, I want to be in the all ladies' home. Now he's the cutest guy. Man, I'm past my time. I'm supposed to get out of here. Normally I do a joke where I show my tits, but I don't have time. You guys have a great night. I've been Sam Lopez. I don't know if someone else is coming up here. Okay, give it up for them.
Well, that was pretty funny. Glad that worked out. Well, thank you all so much for coming here. This was our first official event, so we'd love for you to check out our website, Psyched, and also we'd like you to check out Sight, which is different. It ends with a T. Yes, if you met someone cool tonight and you want to meet people like them again, then definitely go to Caitlin's events. That's where you'll find your people and your community. So thanks again for coming. We super appreciate it. We hope you get home safe. Do not drive on mushrooms, please. Okay. We'll be stepping outside to mingle, so if you guys want to continue your conversations, we encourage it, but please just right outside these clear glass doors because we rented this space, and the people we rented it from, well, they set our times up in the most gentle way possible. So thank you, thank you. We'll all be outside.
actually on Jitter with Rick Donovan.